Chapter 494. Huangsong was not a fool. He could understand the hidden meaning in Feng Zhu's words. However, he was really unwilling to give up. Ever since he was young, he knew how lowly his identity as the descendant of a eunuch was. The people he wanted to make friends with looked down on him, while the people he looked down on wanted to cling to him. The desire to be recognized was deep in his bones. How could he be respected and recognized by everyone? The only way was to become a capable minister and a pillar of the country. At present, Huangsong was still working hard towards this goal. Borrowing the east wind of the earthquake to save people, he skyrocketed and became the young talent that the emperor valued the most. At a young age, he was already a colonel, but the cruel reality did not give him the chance to advance further. Should he choose to continue to be loyal to the emperor and love his country, or should he choose to save his and his family's lives? Feng Zhu had given him the best advice. Now it was up to Huangsong to choose. After a while, Huangsong asked Feng Zhu in a hoarse voice with only a glimmer of hope, "What if I write a letter to secretly inform His Majesty, pretend to agree to Prince Changshuo's invitation, and secretly find a plan to trick Prince Changshuo? What do you think?" Feng Zhu's expression was cold. It was a big blow to Huangsong. First of all, Prince Changshuo will not believe that you are sincere in defecting. Even if he believes, he will always be on guard against you. Moreover, he has many strategists under him. Maybe he will use this as a breakthrough point to tear apart the defense line in Qinzhou. By then, you won't be able to explain yourself. Feng Zhu took a breath and continued. Moreover, His Majesty is narrow-minded and suspicious. Do you think he will believe that you are pretending to defect to Prince Changshuo? If you tell him this, I'm afraid he will suspect that you have the intention to rebel. The whole family will be implicated. After he finished speaking, he looked at Huangsong calmly, waiting for him to completely wake up. Now, the north of Dongqing had fallen into a chaotic war. The people had no way to live. In the south, Prince Changshuo and the emperor were fighting as equals. In the end, no matter who won or lost, the world was already in chaos. Only a saint could turn the tide. Was Huangsong a saint? He was not. Therefore, he could only do the simplest thing, self-preservation. He thought of ways to increase his strength and fight for a place in the chaotic world. Only then could he protect the people under his rule and plot more things. The current Huangsong was still too tender and weak. He needed to be more ruthless. After a while, Huangsong's pained and struggling face calmed down. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made up his mind. Song understands. I will write a letter to inform His Majesty. Retreat in order to advance and find a place to settle down. Huaijia, it's been hard on you. Huangsong's choice was within Feng Zhu's expectations. Compared to his ambition to stabilize the country, Huangsong valued his own life more. Now that he was forced to a dead end by Prince Changshuo's evil scheme, Huangsong naturally had to think of a way to escape and seek revenge in the future. Where there is life, there is hope. Making up his mind, Huangsong wrote a secret letter and sent it to the royal palace. It reached the emperor's desk almost at the same time as another secret letter. The current emperor seemed to be suffering from schizophrenia. When facing imperial consort Huijun, he would speak gently and meticulously, but when facing others, he would fly into a rage. If he was unhappy, he might draw his sword and kill someone, causing everyone to feel threatened. The aristocrats did not dare to talk about politics. Originally, there were still some courtiers who were rather critical of imperial consort Huijun's appearance in the front hall. Now, they were afraid that without her, the danger level would soar. If imperial consort Huijun was here, even if the emperor was furious, he would just throw something and keep a straight face. He would suffer some grievances, but his life would not be in danger. If imperial consort Huijun was not here, then he would have to be careful. It was definitely the blessing of the ancestors to be able to walk out of the front hall unscathed. Today, imperial consort Huijun said that she was not feeling well and did not accompany the emperor. His personal attendant was trembling at the side as he served the emperor. After reading one of the secret letters, the emperor was furious. He swept away the booklets that were piled up like a mountain on the table with his sleeves. The nerves on his face were faintly twitching, as if he was in extreme pain. The emperor held his head, suppressing the splitting headache. At the same time, he was panting like a bull. The onlookers were frightened and did not dare to approach him. Just as the attendant was hesitating whether to secretly send someone to seek help from Imperial Consort Huijun, the emperor picked up another secret letter. His action of opening the secret letter was unusually rough. When he opened the secret letter and read it, his tightly furrowed brows relaxed slightly. His eyes flickered with a strange, flickering light. The first secret letter was a secret agent reporting that Prince Changsho had secretly solicited Huang Song. Huang Song and his trusted aides had discussed in detail in the tent for a long time. The second secret letter was written by Huang Song. He spoke frankly about Prince Changsho's wild ambition. He intended to use such despicable actions to sow discord between the emperor and his officials. He sincerely expressed his loyalty and then excused himself by saying that he was not feeling well and might not be able to share the emperor's burden at the front line. If the emperor felt that he could be of great use, it would be better to transfer him to a more remote place in the rear and continue to shine for the emperor. If not for the timely arrival of the second secret letter, the emperor was afraid that he would have ordered the secret agent and his trusted aide to secretly eliminate Huang Song. However, even if this secret letter came in time, the emperor still disliked Huang Song. He could not help but suspect whether Huang Song had accepted the generous treatment given by Prince Changsho and whether he was not loyal to him. He wanted to find a reason to remove all of Huang Song's positions. Now that Huang Song knew his place and asked to leave the front line, the emperor was not so disgusted and suspicious. After thinking about it, he picked up his brush and wrote an imperial edict. He quickly sent it to the front line to recall Huang Song. He did not want others to think that he was heartless. Now that Huang Song had taken the initiative to give him a way out, he took the opportunity to do so. After writing this imperial edict, he wrote another appointment letter appointing Huang Song as the district magistrate of Diong District in Maota County of Haozhou. Because of his suspicions and Huang Song's young age, he did not give Huang Song a high official title. He only gave him the position of a district magistrate of a rather barren and remote small county. If Huang Song did well, he would promote him in the future. Haozhou was one of the 21 counties in Dongqing's Liuzhou. It was the poorest and weakest place among the 6 states. Among them, Maota County was considered a relatively prosperous place in Haozhou. Diong District in Maota County was the best place among them. It was also considered the emperor's alternative compensation. All of this was within Feng Zhu's expectations. He helped Huang Song find a place to settle down by taking a step back. When the 2 imperial edicts were passed to Huang Song, Jiang Pengji was already eager to lead the troops into battle. Although Xiangyang District was not large, the troops that could be mobilized were as high as 10,000. All of them had been ruthlessly trained. Although they were far from the elite troops in Jiang Pengji's mind, they were far better than the troops who were as wild as dogs and betrayed their comrades. Jiang Pengji despised them in various ways, but the others were already satisfied. They had great expectations for this army. Xiangyang District was Jiang Pengji's base camp. She wanted to conquer the entire territory of Fengyi County. Naturally, it was impossible for her to take away all her assets. Chapter 495. On this day, the wind was blowing and the clouds were scudding. The flags were fluttering in the wind. Jiang Pengji was finally going to leave the small Xiangyang District and embark on a wider and crueler stage. The troops stood in a neat formation below the drill ground. Each of them stood ramrod straight and looked straight ahead, waiting for the start of the oath-taking ceremony. For this expedition, 2,000 veteran soldiers and 2,000 new recruits were left to guard Xiangyang District. The other 3,000 elite soldiers and new recruits were sent to the battlefield. Originally, Jiang Pengji wanted to use a risky and radical method to let the new recruits stay in Xiangyang District. Her original troops and imperial guards, as well as a portion of the newly recruited recruits, would participate in the war. However, this proposal was unanimously opposed by all her subordinates. Wei Ci said, "My lord, This plan must not be carried out. Xiangyang District is a shelter that my lord has passed through. If the new recruits are stationed there, they lack experience. If the enemy takes the opportunity to launch a sneak attack, I'm afraid there will be unforeseen events. To be safe, it's better to keep some experienced veteran soldiers. After he finished speaking, he frowned. He secretly had a headache over her old temper, but he couldn't really watch her take the risk and be radical. Thinking back to her previous life, the only time she suffered a loss in the hands of Qiguan Rang was when she was too happy and almost got ambushed by Qiguan Rang from behind. That time, they suffered heavy losses. Almost everyone thought that she would tear Qiguan Rang into pieces, but the result was unexpected. Not only did Qiguan Rang, who surrendered, not die, he even became her closest confidant. She protected Qiguan Rang, the strategist who surrendered voluntarily. From the beginning to the founding of the country to her death, she even gave the new emperor a warning. It was impossible for Wei Ci to say that he didn't mind it at all. Returning to his prime, Wei Ci understood this person from a different perspective. He slowly understood why Qiguan Rang received special treatment from her. It was simply because Qiguan Rang saw through the feelings beneath her ruthless appearance. Everyone said that Emperor Chun was cold and heartless, bloody and bloodthirsty, temperamental and dictatorial. But was it really so? If she was such a person, how could the Zhang dynasty be established so steadily? Under her rule for decades, the people lived and worked in peace and contentment. The troops worshipped and admired her. Even when she strongly advocated for women to enter the court and implemented various laws that were beneficial to women but detrimental to the interests of the aristocratic families. Even though she encountered obstacles, it was still implemented smoothly in the end. Why had no one ever thought of rebelling against her rule and starting a new dynasty? Just because what she did was indeed for the sake of the vast majority of the people, but the minority of people who lost their interests controlled the right to speak. She was also a person who disdained fame, so she let those clowns who thought they were important jump up and down. However, humans are not saints. Too many people were influenced by the thoughts of others, but Qiguan Rang saw the truth. That's why His Majesty said, Qiguan Wanzheng is the only one who understands me in life. He is probably not enough. Being reborn, standing by her side, and following her from the very beginning, Wei Ci really saw a completely different Lu Shi. This kind of emperor made him even more infatuated and adored. But that was all. He did not dare to casually profane the slightest bit. A monarch and a minister for a lifetime. It was a good ending. After some thought, Wei Ci chose an excuse that would move her, but would not provoke her to deliberately go against him. The others did the same. They had different reasons, but the core idea was the same. You can surf, but you can't be too surf. Jiang Pengji's face turned slightly green, and she clicked her tongue. In fact, she originally wanted to pull everyone out. She wanted to launch a blitzkrieg and quickly conquer the entire Fengyi County. She wanted to be a nameless but powerful county chief of Fengyi County, but she could not dissuade her subordinates. Qiguan Rang raised his eyelids and said, After all, new soldiers are new soldiers. They lack training and combat experience. If the two armies fight, they will definitely be the ones who suffer the most losses. It's not easy to train soldiers, so it's better to bring a batch over. The rest will stay and guard the city. It was a good thing that the Lord wanted to fight, because none of the current troops were conservative. But the problem was that the Lord was unconventional. She was so reckless every day. If she was not careful, she would lose everything. Being a subordinate's heart was too agitated. Jiang Pengji clicked her tongue. All right, I agree. She looked at the crowd with a doting expression, as if she was looking at a group of wooden sticks. These people are so timid. I'll listen to you little princesses' decisions. Is that okay? Jiang Pengji was dressed in military attire. She read aloud the punitive expedition against the Tsing-Yi army that Feng Jin had written. She didn't care about this kind of empty thing at all. She recited it in cadence while secretly rolling her eyes in her heart. She was there to snatch the Tsing-Yi army's territory. If she won, the territory would belong to her. Why would she have so many tricks? Why did she have to carry out justice on behalf of heaven, and save the people of Fengyi County who were in dire straits. Was it necessary to beautify herself as an angel? Facts proved that it was really necessary. The phrase, "there is a justifiable reason," was not just for show. Even though she was sick of it, Jiang Pengji would not act willfully and recklessly. A nameless teacher had always been criticized by others. Even if Feng Jin was not the gunman, she would force him to write a voluminous, punitive essay of a few hundred words to belittle the ancestors of the Tsing army to hell. She used the punitive essay to stimulate the morale of the troops. Next, she mobilized the troops. "Meng Hun, step forward," she shouted loudly. A burly man in his prime walked out from the troops below. He held a long knife in his hand and half-knelt before Jiang Pengji on the stage. "Your subordinate is here. I appoint you as the captain of the Vanguard Battalion." Jiang Pengji said, "Do you have the confidence to sweep away the enemy and clear the obstacles for our army?" "Your subordinate will not let you down, my lord," Meng Hun answered loudly. The silence of the drill ground was filled with a murderous aura. "Li Yun, step forward." Jiang Pengji's gaze fell on Li Yun. She had high hopes for this young man. However, Li Yun was too young, and his battle experience was not as experienced as Meng Hun's. He could not lead an army on his own, so he followed Meng Hun to gain experience in the Vanguard Battalion. "Li Yun greets my lord." Without his usual adorable, naive look, the stone-faced Li Yun was like a completely different person. Every step he took was sonorous and forceful, as if every movement contained a powerful explosive force. Although he could use the silver spear in his hand to take the enemy's head, he was still able to take the enemy's head. "I appoint you as the deputy captain of the Vanguard Battalion. You will raise the prestige of our army together with Captain Meng." The Vanguard Battalion was responsible for the task of scouting the path for the entire army. It was to investigate the enemy's situation and examine the terrain. They could either investigate or launch probing attacks to disrupt the enemy's formation and deployment. It could also boost their morale. Usually, the Vanguard Battalion was made up of the most elite troops. If there was any mistake, it would definitely cause a huge loss to the army's morale. Meng Hun sought stability, and Li Yun was spirited. They were an excellent combination. She appointed Qiguan Rang as the advisor of the Vanguard Battalion. His style of trickery was very suitable for the Vanguard Battalion. Even if they were ambushed, they could turn danger into safety. Jiang Pengji and Wei Ci guarded the center of the army. Su could control the rear. Finally, Chapter 496. Jiang Nongqin. Why does this name sound like a woman's? Many soldiers were secretly suspicious. On the other hand, the elite soldiers brought by Jiang Nongqin straightened their waists one by one. The muscles on their backs tightened slightly, and they were like a tightened spring. They could not help but notice Jiang Nongqin, who stood out from the crowd in the corner. She did not wear men's clothing. She only wore clothes that were convenient for her to move around. It was different from men's clothing, but it could be seen that it was a woman's clothing. She was covered in leather armor, and her long hair was curled up to the top of her head. With a cold face, she walked out from the line with firm steps and knelt on one knee. "Your subordinate, Jiang Nongqin, greets you, my lord." Jiang Nongqin looked very feminine. Even though her skin looked rough after being exposed to the sun for a long time in training, her facial features could not hide the fact that she was a woman. Moreover, her figure did not look like that of a man. Now that she opened her mouth, her voice was slightly hoarse, but it was obviously a woman's voice. It further confirmed this point. It was actually a woman. Most of the soldiers widened their eyes in surprise. Even though they knew that the female battalion was not to be trifled with, they never thought that a woman could go on the general selection stage. Was this a joke? Fortunately, they remembered the instructions during training. Even though they were extremely surprised, they still maintained discipline and did not whisper to each other. The scene made Jiang Pengji's mood better. Even her voice sounded a little lighter. "I appoint you as the commandant of the female battalion to assist the Vanguard Battalion." The size of the female battalion was close to 1,500 people. It could barely be considered a battalion. However, she did not bring the entire female battalion with her this time. She only brought 500 people. Every one of them had the most outstanding performance in the female battalion. They had seen blood on the battlefield and gained combat experience. Although it was only a commandant of 500 people, it looked a little embarrassing. Everyone did not even know the specific tasks of the female battalion. However, the fact that Jiang Nongqin was a woman, that she went on the general selection stage, and that she was appointed as a commandant was enough to stun everyone. They could only suppress their dissatisfaction. The new recruits did not dare to criticize Jiang Nongqin, nor did they dare to question her strength. The best proof was that she had the ability to go on the general selection stage. They still wanted to tremble when they thought of the female soldier who challenged all the new recruits. As for the veterans, they were disciplined. Even if they were dissatisfied, they did not dare to bring it up on such a serious occasion. Therefore, Jiang Nongqin was given the rank of a captain. The 500 women in the female battalion were only a short distance behind the vanguard battalion when they marched. The pressure of marching was great, but these young ladies were all selected from nearly 1,500 people. Every quota was snatched from the hands of their comrades. Naturally, they did not dare to be negligent, nor did they dare to miss this good opportunity to train. Sooner or later, they would have to go to the battlefield. The Tsingy army was just a motley crew. They had also gone through a winter of fatigue and hunger. Their numbers sounded large, but their combat power was rather weak. In addition, they had been dealing with the Red Lotus group for a long time, and their military strength had been greatly depleted. The knowledgeable female soldiers analyzed the pros and cons of this battle and came to the conclusion that if they wanted to accumulate as much experience as possible, they had to participate in this battle. The Tsingy army was only the beginning. In the future, there would be stronger enemies, more dangerous battlefields, and battles with higher mortality rates. As members of the female army camp in Shenyang district, they would have to take this step sooner or later. It was better to accumulate experience from less dangerous battles, putting oneself in a hopeless situation and coming back to life. Jiang Pengji looked around and looked at everyone with disdain. Her voice was hoarse, but there was no lack of fierceness. It made everyone tense up, and their hair stood on end. Let's go to war. From the beginning of autumn to the end of winter last year, Gu Xian's worthless glass tea set had swindled several large sums of wealth from the northern borderline. He had exchanged a large amount of sheepskin and horses of medium quality at a low price. Jiang Pengji had also taken the opportunity to mix a lot of rice bought from the shopping center into the food that Gu Xian had brought. Now, Shenyang district could be said to have a strong army and sufficient provisions. Not to mention fighting a siege battle that they were sure to win. Even if there were a few encounters on a narrow road, they could still withstand it. Half a year had passed. Shenyang district relied on those few colts to form their own cavalry troop. There were not many people in the cavalry battalion. There were only about 600 people. After all, not everyone was suitable to fight on horseback. The total investment to nurture a cavalry troop was not a small amount. The cavalry was mainly used to charge, break up, and cut the enemy's formation. It had a great role and status in ancient wars. Considering that the cavalry battalion was still immature and its role in a siege battle was not that strong, Jiang Pengji did not bring out this precious troop. Raising a cavalry troop really made one's flesh ache. Even a rich landlord like Jiang Pengji felt heartache. The strong wind blew and the flags fluttered. Shenyang district slowly shrunk behind them and became a dot on the horizon. Jiang Pengji rode on White, who was so excited that it wanted to gallop. She followed them at a moderate pace. Wei Si's face was pale from the wind. Seeing that his lips had lost their color, Jiang Pengji said, "I asked you to guard the city, but you insisted on changing places with Huayu. Don't force yourself to die if you're not in good health." The original plan was for Feng Jin to accompany her to battle. Wei Si, who was not in good health, would stay at the headquarters to look after the city. However, the other party took the initiative to volunteer. He said that Feng Jin wanted to take care of his family. As a single dog, it was not a problem for him to go anywhere. Jiang Pengji glanced at Feng Jin and then at Wei Si. She thought that the two of them would fight. Who knew that Feng Jin only glanced at Wei Si leisurely. Wei Xiai also looked at him meaningfully. She did not know what they communicated through their eyes, but the two of them reached a consensus. Jiang Pengji was speechless. She did not understand literati like you, who had complicated thoughts. Anyway, the final result was Wei Xi's victory. Feng Jin stayed in Xiangyang district to look after the city. After that, she heard Qiguan Rang complain about Wei Xi's treachery and that he was evil. Why? There's so many things to do in the district headquarters. If we really leave Wei Xi behind, I reckon that he will not be far from death by the time we return from the expedition. Feng Jin, who was left behind to look after the city, faced with such heavy work. Could he really squeeze out time to enjoy family time with his wife and daughter? It was very risky. Jiang Pengji was speechless. What he said made sense. She actually had nothing to say. After nightfall, the whole army rested on the spot. They were not allowed to whisper to each other during the march, so the soldiers had been holding in for a whole day. Taking advantage of the break between meals, they talked at once about Jiang Nongqin, the unprecedented female officer. How can marching and fighting a war be child's play? How can they let a woman who is not a camp prostitute sneak into the military camp? Under the repeated orders from the district headquarters, everyone knew that the female battalion did not do such improper work. None of the soldiers dared to provoke them. Then go and challenge the other party. If you win, you might be able to replace her. Bah, you have bad intentions. If I can win, I would have been a centurion long ago. Why would I still be here talking nonsense with you? They really did not dare to question Jiang Nongqin face to face. They were also clear about the training situation of the female battalion. Even the men might not be able to withstand it, but they persevered one by one. Just this point alone was enough to win their respect. However, there was still a long way to go before they acknowledged the female battalion as their comrade. The soldier sneered, "Centurion? Why don't you become a corporal first?" After marching for 4 days, they were only half a day's journey away from their destination. Jiang Pengji ordered the military camp to rest for a day. Chapter 497. The sky was already dark. Thick, dark clouds came from all directions and piled up densely. They gathered together and shrouded the sky. Looking up, it looked like an overturned black wak had covered the earth. The howling wind blew through the bushes, bringing with it a muddy fragrance that was unique to the soil. It had rained heavily a few days ago. The bumpy ground was filled with mud that had yet to evaporate. Report: there are signs of marching ahead. It's suspected to be the enemy. Several scouts reported one by one. Meng Hun's expression was solemn. Beside him, Li Yun's eyes were cold. Have we been exposed? Meng Hun frowned and snorted. It might not be that we've been exposed. It could be that the enemy has other plans. Go and investigate again. One by one, the scouts were sent out. News came back one by one. Meng Hun and Li Yun's expressions gradually relaxed. According to our judgment, the marching traces were left half a day ago. Looking at this route, they shouldn't have discovered us. Meng Hun rode on the horse. After a few days of marching, he did not have time to wash up. He looked a little rough. The wrinkles between his brows formed a few deep marks. Li Yun's situation was slightly better than Meng Hun's. He was still fresh meat. Even if he was rougher, it would only make him more tasteful. Now that he was the vice captain of the vanguard, Li Yun became cold and stern. The Tsingyi army doesn't have a complete supply source. They can only rely on plundering the local people to maintain their military expenses. Li Yun's eyes shone with a fanatical desire to fight. If this was really the Tsingyi army's latest supply, then they were extremely lucky. They were destined to have a good start. He stuck out his tongue and licked his dry lips. We still don't know the situation in Chang'an district, but the supply has always been the lifeline of the army. If we cut off the Tsingyi army's supply to Chang'an district, we can take it down even if we besiege it. There were 4 counties in Fengyi County. They were Xiangyang district, which was owned by Jiang Pengji, Chang'an district, Malan district, and Zhaoping district that were occupied by the Tsingyi army. Xiangyang district was the most remote among the 4 counties, but it had the largest area. Chang'an district was the most prosperous. The geographical location of Chang'an district was rather special. It could be attacked or defended. It had always been the center of Fengyi County. Due to various reasons, it was the first place that the Tsingyi army had their eyes on. Now it had become one of their main camps. It was estimated that there were more than 20,000 Tsingyi army members there, although they did not know the specific situation of the Tsingyi army. According to the reports of the spies, the Tsingyi army and the Red Lotus group had been at odds for a whole winter. They were extremely short of resources in all aspects. If they intercepted their rations and supplies now, it would be extremely convenient for the middle troops to attack. Hearing this suggestion, Meng Hun was also tempted. Now that he was the captain of the Vanguard Battalion, it was up to him to decide whether to pursue or attack. The Vanguard Battalion was responsible for scouting the path for the entire army. Not only did they have to investigate the enemy's terrain, but they also had to pay attention to the enemy's movements and disrupt their deployment. If the situation allowed it, they had to engage the enemy's vanguard troops and reap the greatest harvest. Now that they have discovered the Tsingyi army supply team, if they do not seize the opportunity and wait for the supplies to be transported to Anqing district, it will only cause more trouble. The Tsingyi army would get the supplies. Their morale would be maintained at a higher level. It would be disadvantageous for them to fight a war of attrition and delay for the Tsingyi army's reinforcements. If his lord led her troops to the city walls and the Tsingyi army received this batch of provisions, their morale would be maintained at a relatively high level. If they continued to fight a war of attrition with them and delay time for the Tsingyi army's reinforcements, it would be disadvantageous to his side. Without the supplies, the Tsingyi army would be exhausted. They would be besieged for a few days, and their morale would plummet. Without morale, it would be easier to attack the city. Meng Hun believed in the siege weapons that his lord had created, and he also hoped that they would produce an unexpected result in the first battle. However, it was inevitable that there would be sacrifices during the siege, and it was also a good thing to reduce the number of casualties. Soon, he made a decision. Chase. At the same time, he sent a scout to pass the order to the main army. Although the vanguard could go anywhere, they could not go with the flow. If they were completely cut off from the main army, they would be like an earthworm with its body cut off. Both ends would be short. If they encountered the enemy and could not take care of both ends, they would cry. It was proven that Meng Hun was more reliable and conservative than Jiang Pengji. If Jiang Pengji was in charge of the vanguard, she would go wherever she wanted. Wherever the enemy was, she would point her blade at them. She would bite them no matter how small they were. She would kill one if she saw one, kill two if she saw two. As for what the main army was, it was none of her business. She would deal with the enemy when they came. Therefore, Wei Ci could not understand how such an unrestrained person became one of the world's hegemons. It was not until his old master was killed and he joined Jiang Pengji's camp that he found out the mystery. The vanguard was a bunch of mad dogs. The main army and logistics were also a bunch of warmongers. If they wanted to launch a sneak attack, they might fall into the enemy's trap. Later, they got a few strategists to be their nannies. The situation was much better. However, the strategists were hard-working nannies. The generals were still mad dogs that ran everywhere. The people at the front fought and expanded their gains. The nannies at the back cleaned up the mess. It was like an old lady holding a milk bottle and trying hard to call for her grandson to drink milk. The naughty grandson always had an expression that said, "I don't want to listen to you." What would they do? They were also very desperate. Wei Ci could not help but pity Jiang Pengji's previous team of civil officials. Oh, the team of civil officials in this lifetime seemed to be equally pitiful. He secretly glanced at Jiang Pengji. When she heard the news from the scouts, she indeed revealed a look of pity and envy. My lord needs to take command of the main army. She can't be moved easily. Wei Ci reminded her leisurely, as if he was reciting the band-tightening incantation. I haven't said anything yet. Jiang Pengji ordered the scout who came to report the news to leave. She turned her head and rolled her eyes at Wei Ci. Lao Siji Lianmeng. Yes, the streamer didn't say anything, but the look in your eyes clearly betrayed your thoughts. Tiancheng. The streamer looked envious just now. Her heart suddenly softened. You wept out, dubii, to let the warmonger obediently take command of the main army. These literati are really scary. Chiwa, biao. I believe that the streamer is not someone who can be held back easily. She can't lead the vanguard, but she can take the initiative to attack the city. Are any of you like me looking forward to the streamer taking the lead to kill the enemy's general when she calls for battle? Wei Ci was too annoying. He touched a sore spot. However, the eyes of him and the audience in the streaming room were as bright as snow. Wei Ci said, "My lord wants to lead the vanguard, but it's impossible." If the lord were to lead the vanguard, Wei Ci was really not confident that he could lead the main army to find her position. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "How do you know it's impossible if you don't try?" Chapter 498. Jiang Pingji glanced at him and said angrily, "If I'm not willful, just because you say I'm not willful, then I'll lose face." Wei Ci was startled. He didn't seem to know how to continue. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If the time the two of them fought and the days they spent together after that, Wei Ci had known her for almost 30 years. He didn't know that she had such a childish side. It seemed that she had to be coaxed. If it was in the past, he probably wouldn't have dared to speak like that. Naturally, he wouldn't have seen such a rare side of her. Wei Ci's gaze softened a little. It was like a spring with ripples, shining with a cold glimmer. Jiang Pengji made a sound of surprise and rubbed her arms. "Can you stop looking at me like that? You're giving me goosebumps. I don't have the hobbies of men. What if I misunderstood? Besides, with your small physique, don't covet me." Wei Ci's gentle expression froze slightly. His jade-like face turned a little green. He was no longer as warm as before and was as cold as ice. He seemed to be calm and said, "Don't misunderstand, my lord." Jiang Pengji responded with an "oh" and continued to ride on the horse's back to look at the unfolding great universal geographical map. The audience in the streaming room mocked her mercilessly. The army had been marching for many days, and there wasn't much entertainment. Jiang Pengji relied on the bullet screen to kill time. "Hua Shikiyu Piao. Trash streamer, you're bullying my little CI again." 360 degrees Quan Kong fan. Obviously, CI Marin's gaze was so gentle just now, but it was interrupted by the streamer. "An unromantic guy like you is destined to live with your own hand for the rest of your life. Okay? A single dog for life." Thomas Jianxian Defuan. "Streamer, let's hold hands. Whoever gets rid of his singlehood first is a dog. If he can get rid of his singlehood, he'll be a dog. Who wants to hold hands with you?" Sigh. I feel that when Bao Bao and CI Marin have 3 to 5 children, the streamer will still be a single dog. Meng Ledi, Shikiyu Piao. Bah, the one above. Have you asked for my opinion before you King want to have children with my husband? CI Marin Zaiwo Xia. The one above. Have you asked for the first wife's opinion? Samiran Zaiwo B. Did the mistresses above ask for my opinion? Jiang Pingji looked at the bullet screen that was full of insults. She took a deep look at Wei Ci. His beauty was deceiving. Even if they were separated by a plane, a group of men and women would still fight for him until their heads bled. Sai Zixiao. Jiang Pengji suddenly sighed with emotion. For the sake of the happiness of all the people in the world, you really don't want to consider getting married and settling down early? A married handsome man was better than an unmarried handsome man. He wouldn't attract so many girls and butterflies. Wei Ci's originally unsightly face seemed to be covered with a layer of green rouge. Even the look in his eyes changed. He said coldly, "Mercy doesn't like women." Jiang Pengji followed his advice and said, "Then just marry a male wife. At least there'll be someone to warm your bed at night." Thinking of Wei Ci's physique that was afraid of the cold, he should find a hot partner. "No need, I don't like men either," Wei Ci said with a fake smile. It was a little difficult for him to speak. Jiang Pengji listened and looked at his face. Then, she slowly moved her gaze downward and stared at a certain spot. "Do you need to get a famous doctor to take a look?" Women with a severe cold body would easily become weak and sickly. It would be difficult for them to give birth, and they might even become completely infertile. Similarly, men with a cold body would be weak and sickly. Would it affect the normal work of a certain organ? Impotent at a young age and without a nightlife, it would be easy to have a psychological disorder after holding it in for a long time. Wei Si's expression was completely unsightly. He started to deeply doubt whether he was blind in his previous life. Why did he only see the cold and aloof side of Her Majesty, but not her unreliable and indecent side? Sure enough, it was hard to see the big picture. He really had to go back and wash his eyes and polish them. Jiang Pingji happily teased Wei Si until his face turned pale. Meng Hun, who was on the other side, was overjoyed. He thought it was just a small troop transporting provisions. He never expected it to be the Tsing Yi army transporting provisions. Not only were there provisions, but there were also chests of gold, silver, and jewelry. Those things could not even be stuffed in the chests. When the lids were opened, it was estimated that there were 5 wagons. Oh my, it really made people envious. Many of the soldiers who used to be bandits couldn't wait to get into action and kill them. On the other hand, Meng Hun was more interested in the wagons of military supplies. If he could take them down, it would definitely be a great achievement. However, this was not the most eye-catching thing. In the middle of the troop, transporting provisions, there were hundreds of women in ragged clothes. Many of them were barefooted and their faces were numb. Their wrists were tied up with a long hemp rope and strung together to prevent them from escaping. Li Yun hid beside Meng Hun and lowered his voice. Looking at the direction in which they are marching, could it be that they have robbed a rich district? It's hard to say. Although the majority of the Tsing army are people who are suffering, their behavior after they release their wild nature is even uglier and more disgusting than the imperial court. At most, the imperial court doesn't care about the lives and deaths of the people, but these Tsing army are unscrupulous and will not last long. Li Yin had always had a low opinion of the Tsing army. Now that he saw those women tied up on a rope like animals, whipped at every turn, and insulted with vulgar language, it was really unbearable for him. His determined eyes were filled with murderous intent. It's a chaotic world now. Meng Hun's heart was filled with bitterness. The butcher's knife of an animal is often not waved at its enemies, but at the weak women, the immobile elderly, and young children. If one takes a closer look, one can see that there are many greenish-gray heads hanging on the wagons of military supplies. There are men, women, the elderly, and children. This style is not like the people of Dongqing. It's more like the animals of the northern borderline and the southern barbarians. Li Yun was raised by his master, Xie Qian. When Xie Qian taught him spear techniques, he would also tell him stories about the outside world. The northern borderline and the southern barbarians were undeveloped places. Even if Xie Qian did not have any personal feelings, Li Yin could still feel the bloody cruelty. The old skinny man's words are called Rao Ba Hua. The woman's name is not envious sheep. The children call it bone rot, and the same eyes are two-legged sheep. These were the crimes committed by the 3 tribes of the northern borderline and the 4 factions of Nanman. The 3 tribes of the northern borderline have been eyeing Dongqing covetously all these years. Now that Dongqing is in chaos, how can they not be tempted? As for the Nanxing kingdom that was destroyed by the 4 factions of Nanman, the situation was even more tragic. Let's not talk about the numerous crimes committed along the way. After Nanxing's capital was breached, all the male members of the royal family were beheaded and hung on the city wall. All the women were forced to be prostitutes in the camp. The youngest was 3 to 5 years old, and the oldest was 50 to 60 years old. They were not spared. The 4 factions of Nanman even issued a massacre order in order to vent their anger at not being able to conquer the capital. They allowed the soldiers to kill in the capital for a day and a night. If this was not shocking, what about the 4 factions of Nanman that gathered people to eat? Capture people and eat them. Kill thousands every day. Pound and grind the stockade into hundreds of huge mounds. Take people alive and crush them in the mortar. Chapter 499. Meng Hun laughed coldly. Whether it's the north borderline, Nanman, or Dongqing, they are all the same. It's not surprising that they do the same dirty things. Li Yun was silent. He did not dare to respond to Meng Hun's words. Even during the chaotic times of the 16 kingdoms, the people of the Central Plains had an innate sense of superiority. This sense of superiority reached its peak after Xia ended the chaotic times and unified the world. How could the people of the Heavenly Kingdom be mentioned in the same breath as the barbarians? If Meng Hun's words were heard by the old pedants and scholars, he would definitely be condemned and reviled by the people. In the eyes of the people, the barbarians were barbarians. They ate raw meat and drank blood, lacked intelligence, and were cruel savages. On the other hand, the people of the 5 kingdoms of the Central Plains were refined and courteous. Whether it was Dongqing, Nansheng, Zhongzhou, Beiyuan, or Xichong, who looked down on the barbarians. However, Meng Hun said that people were all the same. The people of the Central Plains could also do the bloody methods of the barbarians, they just did not admit it. Such a statement was really deviant. Li Yun subconsciously wanted to refute, but the bloody reality below made him unable to speak. His heart was tangled and uncomfortable. In the end, he could only sigh. Based on Li Yun's intelligence, he could not understand whether it was the rebellious people who created the chaotic times or the chaotic times that drove the rebellious people crazy. Why are you sighing? It's really bad luck. Meng Hun's face was stern. His eyes stared at the Tsing Yi army, who were preparing to rest on the spot. He lectured in a low voice. As a general, you must not show your emotions on your face. You can't let the situation of the war affect your mood. To the captain of the Vanguard Battalion, he had to maintain a calm mind and clear thoughts at all times. He could not make any mistakes. The soldiers of the Vanguard Battalion made up half of the elites of the army. If they lost the war, not only would their morale plummet, their combat power would also be greatly reduced. As the commander of the Vanguard Battalion, the captain had to play the role of the backbone at all times. Even if the situation was bad, he could not easily reveal dejection or sigh. This would affect morale, even if Li Yun did not mean it. Li Yun smiled honestly, revealing the naive and sweet temperament that Meng Hun was familiar with. However, he quickly realized something and quickly tightened his face. On the other side, the Tsing Yi army's troop that was transporting provisions had already found a shady and cool place to rest. The weather is still very cold, but the laborers use up a lot of energy to transport rations over mountains and rivers. They're always sweating profusely. On the other hand, the members of the Tsing Yi army who are supervising wear light clothes and are simply dressed. They are panting more heavily than the laborers who are pushing the rations. One of them sat down on the wagon and fanned himself with the hem of his robe. His slightly swollen face was somewhat unkind. I'm so unlucky. If it weren't for these women walking slowly, we would have arrived long ago. We would have been able to eat and drink well. Why would we need to waste time in this wilderness? A thick phlegm surged up his throat. He spat directly on the face of the woman closest to him. Seeing her scream in panic, he felt much better. I really don't understand these women. My children have already eaten, but they still lack a mouthful of phlegm. The other man leaned against the wagon, grabbed the head hanging from the back of his waist, pulled it off, and threw it far away. Don't go overboard. These women are to be shared with the brothers. I'll let you enjoy them in advance on the road, but don't break them. Since you've eaten the meat, you should let others have some soup. His gaze swept across the hundreds of women with disheveled hair, lowered heads, and shivered. He laughed wickedly, reminiscing something. Women's bodies are so soft, and they taste good. Chaotic times have their advantages. If the world was at peace, how could they have such comfortable days today? They risk their lives to be mountain men who work in the fields. They don't know how long they have to wait to taste women. There are few women. In remote villages, it is impossible to marry a woman. It is common for a few brothers to raise money and buy a wife together. There are about 1,000 members of the Tsing Yi army guarding the rations team. Pairs of eyes lingered on the women. During this period of time, they hastened to transport the rations. The women are by their side, but they can't touch them. Only a few people of high status can casually drag one to the bushes to do it. Many people can't bear it anymore. However, due to the officer's prestige, no one dared to act rashly. Look at your useless faces. When we go back, all the brothers will have share. One by one, there's no hurry. Ha ha. Those women seemed to have been tortured to the point of numbness. Apart from a few who revealed resentful gazes, the rest all had lifeless faces. How could they not be numb? Their villages and homes were destroyed in a day. Their fathers and brothers died tragically in front of them. Not only did their bodies suffer a blow, but their minds were on the verge of collapse. If this was just an appetizer, what happened every day on the road was like a blunt knife cutting their fragile nerves. If these beasts wanted to eat meat, they would be the best and freshest meat. They watched helplessly as people who were originally alive were chopped, washed, cut, and thrown into the pot to be cooked. There were even a few who were more stubborn who were cooked alive. What kind of feeling was that? They were either made to sit between two vats and fire was forced from the outside, or they were roasted on an iron frame, where their hands and feet were tied and first splashed with boiling water. Human flesh is said to think of meat. Eating it makes people think of it. Those who had the courage bit their tongues to commit suicide. Those who had no courage could only endure it bitterly. They trembled with fear, afraid that they would be the next victim. In comparison, the silver humiliation every night was nothing. They wanted to escape, but they had no shoes. There were many gravel in the surrounding terrain. Both their hands were tied to the same hemp rope. It was impossible for them to escape alone. Seeing that they were getting closer and closer to Anqing district, everyone's hearts surged with waves of despair. Some people even felt relieved. If they died like this, it would be good. Come to think of it, even hell wouldn't be so unbearable. A portion of a vanguard battalion hid in a secret place. The improved crossbows were already loaded. The crosshairs were aimed at the heads of the Tsing army. Chief, why do I feel that the weather today is chilly? Someone felt a little uncomfortable. Another person said, look at these heads. Who doesn't feel cold? Cowards. There was a burst of laughter around them. Before joining the Tsing army, many of them were diligent farmers. However, after tasting impudence, they could no longer return to their original state. They could no longer find that simplicity. They wantonly ridiculed their cowardly comrades and roared with laughter. All right, if you've rested enough, all of you get up. Send this batch of food to the city, then enjoy the beauty together. Before the leader's voice died away, blood suddenly spurted out from between his eyebrows. An arrowhead was revealed. Many members of the Tsing army were about to bend over and get up or pick up the weapons at the side. They were at their most relaxed state. A wave of sneak attack killed 200 to 300 members of the Tsing army. Fortunately, Meng Hun and the rest took a roundabout route to the back of the Tsing army. Otherwise, their tracks would have been discovered by the other party. Enemy attack. There's an enemy. After a wave of attacks, corpses fell to the ground. Only then did the Tsing army react. The crowd was already in complete chaos. At that moment, more than 1,000 people rushed out from the originally empty bushes in the forest. The leader was Li Yun. He was about to attack with a silver spear. When he rushed forward, he realized that his target's head had already been pierced through. Li Yun was speechless. Chapter 500. Ever since he came to Xiangyang district, Li Yun had been wondering if he was out of practice. First, his lord snatched the bandit leader's head. He thought it was bearable. After all, she was his lord, and he couldn't afford to offend her. Now that his head was snatched by someone else, Li Yun expressed that he couldn't bear it. When he skillfully retrieved his silver spear, he saw clearly who snatched his head. In a split second, Li Yun was speechless. Jiang Nongqin, the captain of the female battalion. Her rank was even higher than his. Just as he retrieved his silver spear, his nerves tensed. He brandished his spear and deflected the attack. Suddenly, the spearhead pierced through 2 people. Blood washed the silver spear. A streak of silver light streaked across the sky. The king of hell had already mercilessly taken 2 lives. Li Yun's gaze involuntarily fell on Jiang Nongqin. He didn't even see clearly when she dashed in front of him and made the first move. Now that he fixed his eyes on her, he felt that Meng Hun's words were right. This woman really shouldn't be provoked. If most of the soldiers used force to break through tricks and coordinated with their comrades to attack, defend, or attack, Jiang Nongqin was a lone ranger. She didn't need the cooperation of others. She slid into the enemy's camp alone. It was fine if she didn't make a move, but once she did, it would be a life. Almost every move she made was aimed at the lifeline. Two long and short knives of different lengths in her hands were like a judge's pen. Every time she made a move, she would mercilessly cross off a person's name. In terms of ferocity, her performance wasn't inferior to Meng Hun or Li Yun. Compared to Meng Hun's bold moves and Li Yun's exquisite skills, Jiang Nongqin's every move was made to kill. When blood splattered on her face, she didn't even frown. In just a few breaths' time, she had already taken 3 steps forward. There were 5 corpses lying by her feet. She didn't seem like a general at all. She was more like a killer. This was what Li Yun felt. In close combat, she had the upper hand. Li Yun didn't have time to think. The surrounding enemies had already surrounded him. They slowly formed an effective attack. After the initial shock, the members of the Tsing-Yi army reacted one after another. They picked up their weapons and wanted to counterattack. Some of them were despicable and shameless. They even grabbed a woman and made her stand in front of them in a panic. They hid behind her and took the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Li Yun did not make a move because he was benevolent. However, in the blink of an eye, the woman who was used as a shield had already died in Jiang Nongqin's hands. Her expression was still as cold as a wooden sculpture. The member of the Tsing-Yi army who used the woman as a shield did not have time to react. In just a short while, a knife had already pierced his neck from one end to the other. He thought that Jiang Nongqin would take pity on him because of her identity as a woman, or even be restrained. However, her actions had shattered Li Yun's understanding. Unbeknownst to her, Jiang Nongqin's worldview, values were already infinitely aligned with Jiang Pengji's. There was no difference between men and women on the battlefield, and women could not be forgiven or treated worse because of their gender. Only those who survived and those who died. If she was restrained because the Tsing-Yi army used a woman as a shield and caused the loss of her comrades, it would not only be unfair to her comrades, but it would also cause other members of the Tsing-Yi army to follow suit. More women would be captured as shields. This was a vicious cycle. However, in a flash, Jiang Nongqin first killed the innocent shield, then she killed the man who used a woman as a shield. Jiang Nongqin, who was slaughtering on the battlefield, was calm to the point of cold-bloodedness. Such a thought flashed in Li Yun's mind. The long spear in his hand flicked away the enemy's spear, sword, and halberd. With lightning speed, he performed the phoenix nod. The shadow of the spear brought forth a silver shadow. A circular spear mark appeared on the enemy's throat. Fresh blood spurted out from the bloody hole. In terms of spear skills, other than Li Yun's master who could teach him how to be a man, it would be difficult for others to win. Moreover, Li Yun had been through many bloody battles. When he attacked, he had an indomitable aura. However, he could control it at will. Even if someone closed in on him, he was not afraid to fight. 1 inch longer, 1 inch stronger, 1 inch shorter, 1 inch riskier. On the battlefield, people like Jiang Nongqin who fought with close-range weapons were at a disadvantage. However, her attack speed and body movements were rather outstanding. It was not easy for the motley crew of the Tsing-Yi army to hurt her. The people from the female camp were not as tyrannical as Jiang Nongqin, but their performance was remarkable. They fought in groups of 2 or 3 and worked together to besiege one person. However, they had only trained for a short period of time. Their psychological qualities were not up to standard. It was inevitable that they would have staged fright in the face of such a bloody scene. One of the female soldiers was careless, and the Tsing-Yi army got close to her. She raised her huge spear high and was about to land on her head. The female soldier thought she was dead, but she heard the other party's cries of pain. She opened her eyes in a panic and saw that the Tsing-Yi army soldier had 2 bloody holes in her eyes. Her partner's fingers were holding 2 suspicious blood-colored balls. The male soldiers in the chaotic battle did not notice the abnormality over here. However, there were still 300 vanguard soldiers hiding in the dark, launching a sneak attack. Just now, When they were about to provide support, they saw with their own eyes that another female soldier dug out the other party's eyes. Damn it! The soldiers who saw this scene were so frightened that their hands trembled. They almost shot the crossbow. The female camp was really not to be provoked, digging out the eyes of a man without saying a word. Even a man would not be so ruthless. "Why are you in a daze?" Her partner's shout made the female soldier return to her senses. Her body had already reacted one step ahead of her mind. She pulled out the dagger from her waist. While the Tsing-E army soldier was bending over and howling in pain, she stabbed the back of the other party's neck with the dagger. There were not many Tsing-E army soldiers. The laborers who transported the rations were long scared out of their wits. They had all escaped during the first round of shooting. Those women could not leave because they were tied up with hemp ropes. How could the Tsing-E army be a match for the Vanguard Battalion? In fact, the Vanguard Battalion had not killed many people. The ladies of the female camp had experienced the initial fear. One by one, they pounced on their next target with ferocious expressions. Perhaps they were not strong enough, but they cooperated well. None of them survived. As the saying goes, pick the soft persimmon and pinch it. Realizing that some of the people who ambushed them were women, the Tsing-E army planned to use the female camp as the key point to break out of the encirclement. However, when they really rushed over, they realized that these young ladies were much more ruthless than the men. The women who were weak and easily bullied in their eyes were extremely fierce. The long spears in their hands were modified. They were not the usual ones that were more than 10 feet long. They were only 2 heads taller than them. Their weight was also much lighter, so it was convenient for them to wield them. Poof, poof, poof. The sound of the spearhead piercing into the flesh rose and fell. The female soldiers even shouted and pushed the spearhead a little deeper, piercing the other party's stomach. Killing would make people fearful, but it would also make people feel high. The female camp obviously belonged to the latter. They had abandoned their fear of death and their obsession to survive. Almost everyone showed a side that was frightening. Among the 500 people, half of them came from Hejin County. The other half were recruited from Xiangyang District. Chapter 501. Many people were so shocked that they were speechless. They thought to themselves, "Oh my God, have these girls been provoked by someone?" No one expected these women to have such a terrifying side. That ruthlessness was like stabbing the enemy who killed their father. No, if the fathers of these female soldiers had been killed, they might not have been so ruthless. After all, everyone knew the background of the women in the female camp. They were all abandoned by their families. Their lives at home were not satisfactory, and they were even tortured. However, they quickly overturned this judgment. Compared to these female soldiers, the reaction of the women who were surrounded was more terrifying. They just used their weapons to cut the hemp ropes that bound the women's wrists. The originally lifeless woman roared like a wild beast and pounced on the ground. She lifted the stones on the ground with both hands, and before anyone could react, she raised them up high and smashed them down with a bang. Clang, clang, clang. Every hit used all the strength in her body. The hard skulls were smashed open. Brain juice mixed with blood and broken bones flowed all over the ground. The splashed filth splashed on her face, but she didn't feel it. She fiercely gritted her teeth. Her expression was ferocious, and her eyes were about to split open. This was like a signal and also like a button. It unleashed the most resentful and wildest side of many women. Some even pounced on the bodies of the Tsing-E army. They opened their mouths and bit their necks, noses, chests. Blood mixed with flesh was bitten off. As the scene became more chaotic, more and more women vented their anger on the corpses of the Tsing-E army. They almost lost control. The soldiers were shocked by this unforeseen event. Some of their throats kept squirming, and they subconsciously took a step back. "Officer Meng, aren't you going to stop them?" Lian saw these people's actions and faintly felt a chill run down his spine. These women's outburst of madness made even him tremble. Some of the corpses of the Tsing-E army were even smashed into a pool of blood and flesh. They still had no intention of giving up. 2 women even snatched the long spears from the female soldiers. They held the spears tightly with both hands and kept stabbing the corpses of the Tsing army, who had already breathed their last. Fresh blood flowed out from the holes of the sieve-like corpses. Even the veteran soldiers who were used to seeing bloodshed could not bear to look at it. Meng Han looked at the women's reactions and was silent for a while. He raised his hand to stop Li Yun. When one's emotions were suppressed too much, there were usually two situations. Either he would become a cripple and his life would be over, or he would completely explode and change his temperament. This batch of women who were held captive and abused by the Tsing army, a small portion of them had been tortured to the point of losing their sanity, while the rest were as deranged as lunatics. The best way was to give them an outlet to vent their anger. It's fine, let them continue to vent. Let's go pack up the supply carts. We can't stay here for long. If this batch of rations did not arrive in Shingan District, it was hard to guarantee that the Tsing army would not send people to check and provide support. Li Yun was stunned. He looked at the deranged women and only found his voice after a while. But what about these women? If all of them were to stay where they were, there were jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards in the mountains. Not far away in Chang'an District, there was also the Tsing army. Meng Hun stopped his tracks and said helplessly, "We are the vanguard. We can't take them with us." Li Yun understood this logic. After all, he had to look at the bigger picture. Meng Hun sighed and said, "It's less than half a day's journey from here to Chang'an District. They will be safe once our Lord has conquered Chang'an District. If the main army met them, perhaps they could take them in for a while. But they were the vanguard. They could not take these people with them." Jiang Nongxin used a cloth torn from the corpses of the Tsing army to wipe her blood-covered blade while walking towards the two of them. She said in a hoarse voice, "I asked the troops to inform these women to hide in a safe place as soon as possible and wait for news from Chang'an District. The Tsing army has been waiting for rations for a long time. If these women still stay here, they will inevitably be implicated." At that moment, the troops had already started to clean up the battlefield. Those who were not injured pushed the supply carts away, while those who were injured received the care of the female soldiers. The male soldier who accepted her bandage could not help but tremble. Fear was clearly written on his face. "Why are you trembling?" A female soldier had a fierce look on her face. Her face and neck were covered in the enemy's blood. It was already very scary, but now she deliberately pulled a long face and looked fierce. Since when did women become so scary? The troops were very careful, even when they swallowed. They were afraid that their movements would make the other party unhappy. Not only did the female soldiers carry weapons, but they also carried a small bag of items to treat wounds. It was used to clean the filth from the wound and clean and bandage it. This was also a compulsory item in the first aid course. Almost every female soldier was forced to learn it. At least, they had to master theoretical knowledge. Because there was no goal of hands-on experiments when they were learning, they only had theoretical knowledge, but no practical experience. Fortunately, there was no lack of practice targets on the battlefield. It was not a fatal wound, but it was a little rough when treating the wounds. Some of the troops were in so much pain that they grimaced in pain. They wanted to scold them in rage, but the ruthless look of the female soldiers when they killed flashed in front of their eyes. They could only swallow their anger aggrievedly. Damn, is such a fierce woman still a woman? Because there was support from the crossbowmen in the dark, there were no deaths or losses in the surprise attack. Many people were injured, but it was not fatal. After transporting the supply carts away, the vanguard did not deal with the corpses of the Tsing army. Instead, they left them exposed in the wild to be eaten by wild beasts. Those women vented their anger ferociously. They only woke up after they were exhausted and regained their senses. One by one, they stared at the soldiers of the vanguard with vicious and guarded gazes. However, the soldiers did not pay attention to them. Instead, they pushed the supply carts away without looking sideways. The rules of the military camp were very strict. None of them dared to challenge it, not to mention that there were 2 lieutenants and a deputy lieutenant watching, who dared to commit a crime against the law. Another reason was that they were really frightened by the female soldiers. For a while, they were traumatized by women. Quickly leave this place. Escape to the mountains and hide for a few days. The Tsingy army may send troops out of the city to receive the supply carts. If they discover your traces and see the corpses on the ground, the Tsingy army bastards will not let you off. In less than half a day, Chang'an District would probably receive news of the sneak attack on the supply carts. One must know that previously, the cooks who transported the rations abandoned the rations and ran in all directions. This news could not be hidden for long. The female soldiers conveyed the message of the female battalion's lieutenant, Jiang Nongqin. The malice and guard in those women's eyes did not decrease. When they saw that this group of people really did not care about them, and those men did not even look at them, some of them could not help it. Can you bring us along? Please save our lives. Although they survived, they were abandoned in the wilderness. Surrounding them were only the Tsingy army who had died beyond recognition. After all, they were still afraid. Previously, they were not afraid because they were dominated by hatred. Now that their emotions had calmed down, their weak side prevailed again. No. Chapter 502. The woman was confused by the female soldier's quick reply and blurted out subconsciously. Why not? The one in front of them was also a woman. Why couldn't she bring them along? The female soldier said, "Marching to war isn't child's play. Find a place to hide and wait for the news from Chang'an District." Many of the women were at a loss, as if they didn't know what to do in the future. There were also a few more shrewish women who were very afraid of the female soldier's cold and uncaring attitude. They wanted to hold on to the last piece of driftwood and spoke without thinking. "Why didn't you save us? Are you afraid that we'll steal your men, and that's why you're talking nonsense?" If it was any other time, if they really met such women, they might have pounced on them and torn their mouths apart. Although the people in the mountains were simple, it didn't mean that they weren't stupid and savage. This kind of savage was often used against the weak. Most of the female soldiers were between 13 and 15 years old. In this era, this age was enough to be engaged and find a family. However, most of them were unmarried and had no immunity to those dirty words. How could they compare to the real, shrewish shrews? The female soldier's face turned red and green, as if some bad memories had been evoked. Wasn't the female battalion initially misunderstood as a brothel? When her family sent her over, they looked at her as if she was a person who had contracted a disease. When they pushed her into the fire pit, they couldn't wait to get away from her, as if being a camp prostitute was her fault. Now that the female battalions had gained their reputation, and this surprise attack had displayed the combat strength of the female battalions, presumably, no male soldiers would dare to look down on the female soldiers of the female battalions. However, their moods were not even a little brighter, and they were actually pointed at and ridiculed. Who could stand it? The female soldier held a long spear, the red tassel on the spearhead dripping with uncoagulated human blood. She glared coldly at the person who spoke. She snorted and turned to leave. She had already conveyed the message. If these women lost their lives because they didn't listen to the advice, they couldn't care less. After the woman finished speaking, the more she thought about it, the more reasonable she felt. Just as she was about to argue, the female soldier threw her a disdainful look, turned around, and left. Left. From the beginning to the end, she didn't even look at her. The female soldier had only taken a few steps when the woman behind her sat on the ground. She stretched out her legs and slapped her thighs with both hands. Her face was crying and her mouth was muttering curses. She cursed the Tsingy army for being heartless, cursed herself for having a tough life, and cursed God for being unfair. Have you conveyed the message? Some of the women's battalions stayed behind to retreat. Jiang Nongqin was one of them. The female soldier said, "I've already brought them here, but I don't know if they'll listen." Jiang Nongqin's face was cold, and her tone was flat. Everyone has their own fate. If they die here, so be it. In today's world, the least valuable thing is human life. Those who want to save themselves can still be saved, but those who want others to save them are doomed to be hopeless. Marching to war meant that one's head was tied to one's belt. The soldiers couldn't even take care of themselves. So where would they find the time to deal with these things? Didn't they see that the Tsingy army that was escorting the rations was completely annihilated? Not a single one was left alive. Apart from the fact that the women were too ruthless and those women killed the defenseless Tsing army, there was another reason. Captives were not needed at all times. Once they became captives, their lives could be ended at any time. Sometimes, in order to speed up the army, the captives would be a burden. The merciful ones would be given a quick death, while the cruel ones would be buried alive. What's more, if there was a shortage of rations, the captives would even be slaughtered and made into dried meat to satisfy their hunger. The Lord was rich, but it wasn't to the extent of making dried meat. However, if the captives were a burden, Jiang Nongqin wouldn't be merciful. Captives could be used as free labor. What about these women? Apart from being a burden, they would only be a burden. Anyway, they had already been extremely benevolent. If the other party couldn't think it through, they could only wait for death. Jiang Nongqin retracted her gaze and said calmly, "Let's go and catch up with the troops in front." Yes. After everyone left, those women looked at each other blankly. Some of the smarter ones had already thought of finding a place to hide to avoid suspicion. Those who were immersed in their own thoughts were crying, making a scene, and cursing dirty things. Occasionally, they would even involve the soldiers in the women's camp. In short, they had never thought that the women soldiers were decent soldiers and not prostitutes who used their beauty to serve men. Naturally, there were some who were tortured by the Tsing army to the point where they were like walking corpses. They simply didn't care about what was happening in the outside world. Those who deserved to die, someone sneered coldly and said in a peculiar tone, "You're not good looking. Why would they like you? Even when you're cooking and eating, you're complaining that you're dirty. When those beasts were suppressing you, weren't you fawning over this and that? I didn't see you hate them so much then." The woman who spoke had reason to hate the woman who was making a scene. Many women came from the same village. Those beasts from the Tsing army were suppressing her. In order to protect herself, she blurted out that she was hiding in the cellar. She pointed out the hiding places of many women just to gain some benefits from the Tsing army. What a stupid woman. Her intestines were completely black. If she hadn't done that, a few women in the village could have escaped. It was all because of this rotten black widow. Some could not bear the humiliation and committed suicide. Some were humiliated to death. Some gritted their teeth and were bullied by beasts one after another. There were also people who had their limbs chopped off and the flesh on their chests cut off. They were thrown into the pot to cook meat soup. Why didn't such a woman die? That woman was like a fur on her tail that had been stepped on. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws and pounced on her, wanting to tear her face. However, she didn't succeed. Her face was hit by a flying stone. A hole was immediately formed on her forehead and blood flowed out. She cried and howled. Tears and mucus flowed down her face. Before the village was in trouble, this woman loved to gossip. She made up stories about women from different families having affairs with other men. Her mouth was full of obscenities, and she even caused people to die. She clearly knew that the butcher at the village entrance was petty and very possessive of his wife. However, she still talked nonsense everywhere. She said that the butcher's wife was fooling around with the village's ruffians at home. She made it sound so real. That young wife was unable to defend herself. She was beaten to death by the jealous butcher. Only then did the talkative woman shut up in embarrassment. Chapter 503. On the other side, the people in Chang'an district were also restless. The Tsing army had grown too much in a short period of time. Everyone was like a mouth, but they couldn't take out enough food to feed everyone. They could only plunder and clean up everywhere. However, the amount of food obtained through this method was limited. Many people still couldn't fill their stomachs. There were people in the Tsing army, but no one could manage such a big family business. They were short-sighted and did not know how to manage it. To put it bluntly, they were a group of bandits with no discipline or morals. Even though they were more powerful than the Red Lotus group in the beginning, after a winter of anxiety, the Tsing army's power became smaller and smaller. On the contrary, the Red Lotus group was like the sun in the sky. Its territory expanded step by step, further reducing the living space of the Tsing army. Now, Chang'an district was desolate. The people shut their doors and did not go out. There were few people on the streets. No one dared to expose their rations. The merchants who could escape had already done so. Those who could not escape had been plundered by the Tsing-E army. Half a lifetime's worth of savings had been forcibly taken away. Those who were lucky could still keep their lives. Those who were unlucky died on the spot. Now, the people were full of complaints, secretly mocking that Tsing-E army should be renamed as a bandit army. Last autumn, because of the earthquake in Shangjing, there was very little grain production. Moreover, the Tsing-E army was causing trouble everywhere. This caused the farmers in Chang'an district to lose their annual harvest. After the beginning of spring, there were no good seeds to sow, and the grain stored at home was robbed by the Tsing-E army. Many people could not stand the hunger and the tyranny of the Tsing-E army. They were afraid of losing their lives, so those who could escape escaped. The old, weak, sick, and disabled who couldn't escape stayed behind, relying on the food they carefully stored to survive day after day. Some people were even afraid that the smoke from cooking rice would attract the Tsing-E army, so they only dared to soak the rice in water and then eat it. Last winter, countless people froze to death. Now, there were people starving to death in Chang'an district every day. The district headquarters had already been occupied by the Tsing-E army. As one of their main camps, it still maintained its luxurious decorations. The common people outside did not have warm clothes, did not have enough to eat, so they froze to death or starved to death. The leaders of the Tsing-E army, on the other hand, were enjoying themselves, eating meat and drinking wine. However, they were not in the mood to enjoy such an extravagant life because there was not enough food in Chang'an district. If the food shortage continued, not only would the people below starve, but they would also have to endure the taste of hunger. Damn it, didn't they say there was a batch of rations? Looking at the time, even if he crawled, he should be here by now. Why isn't he here yet? After half a year, many of the valiant leaders had grown fat, and this one was no exception. His fingers were full of fat, and his knuckles were round and round, looking like short, fat sausages. His originally bronze-colored skin had also become a bit whiter. Could it be a problem on the road? The members of the Tsing-E army who were in the district headquarters were at least at the level of a small chieftain. Their faces were all flushed red. Looking at their faces, one could tell that they had lived comfortably in the past. After all, the Red Lotus Group's evildoers are very strange. The fat general pondered for a while and said, "How about this? Send someone out to investigate." This batch of rations was exceptionally important to the Tsing-E army in Chang'an district. If they did not have enough rations, they did not know what the Tsing-E army would do. By then, even they would not be able to suppress them. Thinking of this, the fat general furrowed his brows fiercely. The small leader received the order and left. Another shifty-eyed small leader took the opportunity to suggest, "General, didn't everyone say that the neighboring Xiangyang district is overflowing with wealth? If there's really no rations, we can attack them and occupy that piece of land. Do we still have to worry about not having enough rations?" When the small leader said this, the spy's words surfaced in his mind. According to the spy's description, Xiangyang district was a place comparable to the heavenly court. It was clean and tidy, and the houses were all new. It was so beautiful that it did not seem like it belonged to the human world. It was more like it fell from the sky. Every citizen was dressed like a noble, and no one had starved or frozen to death at that time. The small leader scoffed at the words. How could there be such a good place in the world? However, now Chang'an district was facing the predicament of running out of ammunition and rations. The promised rations had yet to arrive. This made him anxious. He originally thought that this suggestion would be rewarded. At the very least, it would be able to divert the general's attention. Who knew that he would be scolded instead? If Xiangyang district was easy to conquer, I would have done so long ago. Do I need your hindsight? The general said angrily. The fat on his face jiggled, and his eyes were almost squeezed out by the fat. Not long after, a messenger suddenly rushed in from outside. He knelt on the ground and panted, "Bad news. What's bad news?" The general's heart tightened. The messenger caught his breath and said heavily, "The rations were robbed." "What?" The small leaders in the hall were shocked. The general directly stood up and grabbed the messenger's collar with one hand. He lifted him up and said furiously, "Say it again. What was robbed? Which bastard dared to rob my rations?" The messenger said with difficulty, "It was the cook who transported the rations. They escaped and said that there was an ambush. They didn't see who the enemy was." The general's face was ashen. The fat on his face trembled with his heavy breathing. "That's too much." He casually threw the messenger out. Those good-for-nothings who transported the rations didn't even see who the enemy was. The general was about to say that the cook who transported the rations should be killed to avoid wasting rations. Just as the words reached his throat, another sound came from outside. "Report." The general took a deep breath and asked, "What's the matter now? There are thousands of troops surrounding the city." "What?" Everyone's faces were already ashen to the point where they couldn't look anymore. The rations were robbed, and then the enemy came knocking on their door. It was like when it rains, it pours. They were out of luck. "Is it the demons from the Red Lotus group again?" The messenger said, "No, the flag on it says Lu. They've already started challenging us." "Lu? Which family is this?" Jiang Pengji indicated that she was not willing to challenge them. They were already at the city gate. "Wouldn't it be better to just start fighting? What if they don't come out?" Jiang Pengji turned her head and asked Wei Ci, "Don't you think this is very childish?" They had to have a war of words with the enemy before they started fighting. They would curse their parents, and it would be like children playing house. Wei Ci's face was cold. He said, "This concerns morale. My lord, please don't joke." Jiang Pengji responded with an "oh." She behaved herself for a while. She made things difficult for Wei Ci again. She held back her laughter and asked, "But some of the soldiers can only speak in the local dialect. They can't speak in the official language, and they don't understand the dialects of other places. If the people challenging us don't speak the same language, wouldn't it be like chickens talking to ducks?" Wei Ci was speechless. Su Ku, who had already pacified the logistics and ordered all kinds of siege equipment to be in place, rode over on horseback. When he heard this tricky question, he almost fell off his horse. She could not make things difficult for Wei Zixiao. Even if she asked Master Yuan Jing, the old man might not be able to answer. Jiang Pengji muttered to herself, "Do both sides have to communicate beforehand and send an interpreter who is proficient in dialects?" Chapter 504. Xiaozai Wipe a Bye. To be honest, I really don't understand the thinking of the ancient people. Why did they inform you before the war? You have to be careful. I'm bringing people to fight you. I'll give you time to prepare. Come out and fight it out. Jiang Pengji saw the bullet screen and secretly nodded. She had the same idea. Why did they have to challenge them outside the city? They could just give the order to attack. They had enough siege equipment. It would not be a problem to break through the walls of Anqing district. If Wei Ci knew what she was thinking, he would probably sigh again. Jin Tian Jieji. To be honest, I don't understand either. But it is reasonable to exist. It should be in line with the national conditions at that time, right? For example, the Western Knights here have a dual format where two parties of the same type fight each other. Infantry against infantry, cavalry against cavalry, artillery against artillery. There won't be artillery bombardment of cavalry or cavalry crushing infantry. They will even greet each other politely before the battle. Kuyan Sisi. To the person above, you're talking about the Battle of Generals, right? It's like the Battle of Generals in the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Now they're challenging each other. It feels different. In comparison, I think it's more normal to challenge each other. The Battle of Generals is too Chinibyu. Jiang Pengji could still find time to look at the bullet screen on the battlefield. She secretly raised her eyebrows when she saw the comment. Her opinion was the opposite of the audience's. It was stupid to challenge each other. On the contrary, the Battle of Generals was quite interesting. If it was a battle of generals, she could at least relax. She didn't have to sit in the middle army like a fool. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Kukawopo Peo. TSK. I think the Battle of Generals is super exciting. I used to watch the old version of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Every time I saw generals riding their horses and fighting to the death in front of the two armies, I felt that it was special. The three heroes fought Lu Bu, Wen Jiu beheaded Hua Xiong, and so on. Xiangshin Hua Man Lu. In ancient times, there was a battle of generals, also known as a teacher. A teacher is a challenge. I agree with what the previous friend said. It is reasonable to exist. In ancient times, where the population was sparse, survival was difficult, and lifespans were short, overly violent methods of war would only cause more casualties. Often, the outcome of the battle of generals could greatly affect morale. It could even be the key to victory. What was morale? In Jiang Pingji's era, the most important factor in war was technology. The second was tactical layout, and weapons were the key to victory. The influence of individual heroism on the outcome of a war was almost negligible. However, in this era where information was outdated, while equipment was still important, morale seemed to be even more important. If morale was too low, the soldiers would not be in the mood to fight. They would even flee at the sight of the enemy. The enemy didn't even need to fight. They could just go and capture the captives. For the weaker side, if they won the battle of generals, it would stimulate the morale of the soldiers behind them, and they might even be able to defeat the strong. One person chased after 10 people and didn't even pant. Su Ku, who was at the side, did not know whether to laugh or feel sorry for Wei Si. Why did he have to meet such a crafty lord? The rules of the battlefield have always been like this. Su Ku smiled and helped Wei Si out of the predicament. He said, "Everyone knows that when you challenge someone to a fight, you will not say anything nice. Even if you curse in a dialect that the other party does not understand, it does not matter, as long as you know that it is a provocative curse." Jiang Pengji felt a little guilty from Wei Si's gaze, as if she had done something to the little princess. Now that Su Ku was trying to give her a way out, she went along with it. She changed the topic in a stiff tone, pretending to be concerned about the battle. Looking at the watchtower, he said, "What should we do if no one comes out?" Wei Si said, "Continue shouting. If the side that was challenged did not fight for a long time, it would be regarded as a coward, which would also affect the morale of both sides." Wei Si only wanted to increase the morale of his own side and suppress the morale of the enemy. It was not important whether the other party came out to fight or not. If they did not come out to fight, continue shouting and attack when the time was right. If they came out to fight, it would be better. The martial arts of their own generals were not just for show. The morale of the other party would collapse faster. The B** starred upstairs if you have the guts. Come down and fight with me. Could it be that all of you have been cleansed and become a coward without a bird? If you know what's good for you, quickly come down and kneel down to welcome us into the city. We can still let you die a quick death. It was obvious that a battle was approaching, but the scene of the confrontation at the top and bottom of the city was too funny. The atmosphere in the streaming room was quite relaxed. The soldiers who were cursing below were not tired of it. They could not wait to spread their voices throughout the entire Chang'an district. The members of the Tsing-Yi army on the watchtower looked panicked and afraid. They were so stunned that they could not even retort. The more it was like this, the greater the difference in morale between both sides. At that moment, Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes and suddenly said, "Someone's coming." Not long after, an unusually plump and strong man appeared on the battlement of the city wall. He was bare-chested like the Mithrial Buddha, exposing his chest, buttocks, and breasts. As soon as he came up, he cursed exasperatedly, "Son of a B** downstairs. Your grandfather is here." Leon squinted his eyes, brandished his spear, and urged his horse forward. "My lord, please allow me to fight with the villain. I will definitely take the head of the enemy." Jiang Pengji glanced at Li Yun with hidden bitterness. He had already volunteered to fight. How could she snatch the head of her subordinate? Was she that kind of lord? "Go. I wish you a triumphant return," Jiang Pengji said seemingly magnanimously, but there was a hint of reluctance in her eyes. Li Yun was a simple-minded child. How could he understand all this? He did not understand, but Wei Si did. Li Yun would definitely be put in a difficult position when he returned. Creak! The city gate of Chang'an district opened a crack. 3 leaders came out on horseback. Behind them were hundreds of members of the Tsing army. When everyone saw the appearance of the leader, they almost burst out laughing. Sansen Yuanya, what the F***CK? Did you see that poor horse? Its hooves are trembling, right? Pia Piuyong, the best of the match, the most pitiful horse in history. Looking from afar, the leader of the Tsing army was holding a huge axe in his right hand. Although his clothes were gathered up because his body was too fat, it looked like it was tightly attached to his body. His width alone was equivalent to that of 3 normal men. He sat alone on the horse's back. His buttocks occupied half of the horse's body, and his fat flesh collapsed. The horse he was riding was also overweight. It did not have the vigorous posture that a fine horse should have, and its 4 hooves were trembling. How is this a battle? This must be a comedy, right? Kneeling for you, Ebiao. I say, my horse is amazing. It's so fat, but it can still carry its owner who weighs a small mountain. Buki Anlio. I guess it's more than 280 caddies, including the axe in his hand. It should be close to 400. What a hard-working horse. The fat general of the Tsing army raised his big axe and said to Li Yun, who had come out on horseback, "Grandson, your grandfather is here." Li Yun snorted coldly. The horse he was riding seemed to have sensed it and snorted. At that moment, the members of the Tsing army on the city wall suddenly shouted, "General Songtian is mighty. General Songtian will win." Li Yun's hearing was superb. He almost pulled a long face when he heard that. Was the Tsing army invited by a fool? Jiang Pengji resisted the urge to smile. She coughed softly and waved her hand. "Beat the drums. You ignorant brat. Give me your life." General Songtian shouted. The fat horse he was riding suddenly broke out at a speed that did not match its size. Chapter 505. Clang. With a loud noise, the silver spear made a feint, leaving a silvery shadow in the air. It forced the huge axe to deviate from its direction and used this to offset most of the force. Even so, Li Yun still felt numb between his thumb and forefinger. He was secretly shocked by this man's arm strength. If it were not for his solid basic skills and excellent spear technique, the long spear might have been knocked out of his hand. At that time, General Songtian would take advantage of his victory and attack him with his sword. By then, Li Yun's life would be in danger. Not only was Li Yun shocked, but the expression of the fat man who called himself General Songtian also changed. He had never expected that his time-tested move would fail to succeed. In the past, those fools always took the fat man lightly and thought that he did not have much ability. When they really fought, they would either be chopped to death by General Songtian's axe or their weapons would be knocked out of their hands. Then, they would be beheaded because they could not escape in time. Li Yun's specialty was not strength, but speed. No matter how strong General Songtian was, it was useless if he could not hit someone. Every time Li Yun deflected the force, it felt like a fist punching cotton. It was extremely uncomfortable. Li Yun's attack speed was extremely fast. Even a conceited person like General Songtian did not dare to take it lightly. This was because Li Yun was very good at restraining those who used strength to break tricks. Unfortunately, General Songtian was one of them. Li Yun slightly narrowed his phoenix eyes. After a few tentative attacks, he soon found out General Songtian's weakness. It was true that General Songtian was very strong, and his huge body gave people a strong visual impression. But he also had 2 fatal points. One was his reaction speed. In Li Yun's view, General Songtian was as slow as a tortoise. The second was his endurance. Just now, General Songtian had used all his strength when they met face to face. After missing a move, General Songtian's breathing began to become heavier. As the two fought, General Songtian gradually became anxious, fearing that he would lose to a fair-skinned, beardless boy. Soon, an idea flashed through his mind. He suddenly opened his mouth, and his voice was like thunder. "Pretty boy, hand over your life to your grandpa." General Songtian was flustered when he saw that Li Yun was fighting with ease and dexterity like a loach. After fighting for more than 30 rounds, Li Yun was still calm and breathing steadily. His hand that was holding the silver spear did not tremble at all. Obviously, Li Yin was looking for an opportunity to kill him. He shouted loudly, tried to use his voice to disturb Li Yun. At the same time, he found an escape route for himself. Sweat the size of beans appeared on his fat face. Very quickly, the sweat flowed down his thick chin and wet the front of his shirt. The look in Li Yun's eyes changed. He pretended to be shocked and was stunned for a moment. General Songtian was delighted to see this and quickly seized the opportunity. Die! There was another angry roar. Li Yun's face turned paler, and his spear was no longer as agile and swift as before. The viewers in the live stream nervously looked at the two people standing together in front of the formation. The bullet screen in the live stream gradually decreased. Obviously, their attention was attracted by the battle, and they were not in the mood to send bullet screens. However, following General Songtian's roar, the bullet screen exploded. Luo Luo peanut candy. F***CK. That's too shameless. That loud voice almost scared me to the point that I lost my phone. Han Mei is so close to him, and I'm worried about his ears. If he's scared by accident, he might lose his life. Xuehai Liu Xiang. How should I put it? Although the Battle of Generals is a one-on-one challenge, it involves a fight of life and death after all. Apart from not allowing a second person to intervene, any means are allowed. For example, shouting to disturb the opponent is not considered shameless. Chiue Bo. Although it's allowed, Brother Han Mei is concentrating on the battle. If he suddenly shouted like that, wouldn't a timid person be scared out of his wits? Think about it. When you're concentrating on doing your homework or listening to a lecture, a guy roars in your ear. His voice is comparable to heavenly thunder. I think not only will he be scared out of his wits, but he will also probably go deaf. The plane is late. My heart aches for Brother Han Mei. Streamer, accept the gift. Remember not to star my husband. Ciao. My heart aches for him too. Besides, that's my husband with unparalleled waist strength. How can he be a mistress? Because of the system's little tricks, the user will be kicked out of the streaming room and his IP address will be blocked as soon as the national forces or influential organizations of that dimension appear on the bullet screen. Therefore, most of the audience in the streaming room are onlookers. It's easy for them to deviate from the topic. Unparalleled waist strength. Thinking about it carefully, it's a bit dirty. After a while, the spectators realized that something was wrong. Is Brother Han Mei going to be defeated? It seems that since General Songtian's trick, Brother Han Mei has slowly fallen into a disadvantageous position. Han Mei's husband. Damn it. How can my Brother Han Mei lose? Wu Yue Biao. Come on, Brother Han Mei. Get up and defeat that fat man. Catch him and light him up as a sky lantern. Shinda Zizi. No, I'm too nervous. Brother Han Mei can't lose his first battle. Jiang Pingji looked calm. Wei Ci smiled. Only Su Ku, who was unaware of the situation, was so anxious that he gripped the reins tightly, fearing that Li Yun would be defeated. On the battlefield, the sound of drums was like thunder. The banners were fluttering and a strong wind was blowing. Li Yun gradually showed signs of defeat. In a last blow, the silver spear in his hand was almost knocked out of his hand. Jiang Pengji suddenly said, soon, Li Yun was no match for General Songtian. He could only clench his teeth and turn around to escape. He got off the warhorse and ran very fast. General Songtian laughed and chased after him. He raised his axe high and was about to chop it down. Just at that moment, the door in front of General Songtian was wide open and there were flaws everywhere. A good chance. Li Yun, who had already patted his horse to escape, had a sharp look on his face. He pulled the reins with his left hand abruptly, and the horse he got off turned around. Li Yun, who was supposed to escape, did not. The weak momentum of his spear was stronger than when he was at his peak. It seemed that the frequent predicament he was in just now was just an illusion of General Songtian. Shocked, he wanted to withdraw his weapon to resist, but a dazzling silver light had already struck him like a thunderbolt. Poof! The sound of the spearhead piercing into flesh was heard. The silver light had already sunk into General Songtian's body. Li Yun bent his waist handsomely on the back of his horse and sidestepped General Songtian's inertia. He went around to General Songtian's back, raised his hand, and grabbed the silver spear that had penetrated General Songtian's body. Then he pulled it out forcefully. Beautiful! A trace of admiration flashed across Jiang Pengji's eyes. Li Yun had beheaded General Songtian. Then he grabbed the head and spurred his horse back to the battlefield. "My lord, fortunately, I didn't disappoint you." Li Yun's face was still a little flushed, and his breathing was only slightly rapid. He did not look like the miserable state he had been in just now. The audience, who had been so scared that they did not dare to breathe and had prepared themselves for Han Mei's death, opened their mouths wide in astonishment. There was a gap of a few seconds in the bullet screen until they came to their senses. Only then did they start to send bullet screens at a high speed to express their surprise. Xianggu has returned home. What a beautiful sudden thrust. Chapter 506. When Li Yun returned with General Songtian's head in his hand, the drumming sounds on their side became louder and louder, like raindrops. The drummers were so excited that their cheeks turned red and their veins stood out. The muscles on their arms bulged, and they tightened their sleeves. The morale of the whole army became higher and higher. "You won beautifully," Jiang Pengji said. Li Yun did win beautifully this time. His spear technique was excellent, but the battlefield was different from a simple spar. As a newbie, he had such a performance in his first battle with the enemy's general, which showed that Li Yun's talent was indeed impressive. Li Yun resisted the urge to smile. His dark eyes were sparkling, and everyone could feel the joy lingering around him. On the other side, the morale of the Tsing-Yi army plummeted. The Tsing-Yi army on the city wall cheered for General Songtian. When Li Yun fell into a state of decline, they became even more arrogant. However, no one expected that Li Yun was just cleaning up his opponents and chopping off the enemy's general's head in an extremely unexpected way. The Tsing-Yi army had high hopes for General Songtian, but now they were panic-stricken. "General," the two team leaders who went out of the city with General Songtian screamed tragically. They looked as if they wanted to ride their horses to avenge General Songtian, but they held the reins with their left hands and hurriedly retreated. They were so scared that they could not even control their horses and almost fell off their backs. The audience in the live stream despised their embarrassing, cowardly, and heartless behavior. General Songtian, who had lost his head, fell from his horse to the ground with a dull thud. Blood gushed out and stained the ground. The swollen horse stood on the spot in a daze. After a while, it nudged General Songtian's corpse as if it was crying sadly. The two team leaders and the 100 or so Tsing-Yi army members did not even dare to collect General Songtian's corpse. They hurriedly retreated and wanted to return to the city. Ming Tian Wuging, "Damn, isn't this too heartless? The corpse of their general is still lying on the ground. They should at least go and collect it." They trembled and wanted to run back. Don't they know that it will affect their morale even more? They are as stupid as pigs. Come on, everyone is afraid of death. You can't expect everyone to be loyal and courageous. Come to think of it, if he was a loyal and courageous person, he probably wouldn't mix around with the Tsing-Yi army. There was nothing wrong with doing so. Jin Tian singing. Don't you guys think that the fat man is lying on the ground like a meat patty? Perhaps it was because they had seen so many similar cruel scenes that they were slowly able to accept the bloody style of the live broadcast. Now, they would not be startled by the sight of dead people. Their focus was on the corpses of Li Yun and General Songtian that no one had collected. Han Mei was getting more and more handsome. Those small leaders also knew that it was not good for them to do so, but they did not want to die for General Songtian. What if the enemy took the opportunity to attack while they were trying to snatch the headless corpse? Moreover, their general had been killed by the young general on the other side. Was there even a need to fight this battle? Even when they were facing the Red Lotus group, the Tsing-Yi army had never suffered such a huge defeat, not to mention having their general killed by the enemy. Now, the Tsing-Yi army in Chang'an district was like a rooster that had lost a fight. They were extremely dispirited. No one stood up to boost their morale, which caused their morale to become lower and lower. They completely lost the courage to fight. They only wanted to use the tall city gate to block the enemy and gain a sense of security. However, even if they were to defend the city, they did not think that they could defend it. It turned out that whether they wanted to fight or not, Jiang Pengji was definitely going to fight. Seeing that the Tsingyi army could no longer raise their morale, Jiang Pengji smiled. It was better to let them die faster. Take my bow and arrow. She stretched out her hand. Meng Hun took Jiang Pengji's long bow. She easily pulled the heavy bow to the fullest, and the arrow pierced through the air. The Tsingyi army guarding the city was shocked by the oncoming arrow. They shouted in panic, and then they heard the sound of it shattering. In the next second, the flag that was stuck on the battlement of the wall suddenly collapsed and hit the head of the Tsingyi army member with a clang. The scene was silent for a second. Then, an earth-shattering roar of excitement soared to the sky. It was neat and uniform. As he shouted, everyone could feel the ground tremble. "My lord is mighty! My lord is mighty! My lord is mighty!" Jiang Pengji pulled out the long sword hanging on her waist and pointed it at Chang'an district. "Attack the city!" A loud and clear horn sounded from the middle army. It resounded through the sky and quickly spread to the entire army. However, there was a phenomenon that puzzled people. No matter how loud the horn sounded, the entire army did not move. The audience in the streaming room was dumbfounded. What happened? However, the Tsingyi army on the city wall could clearly see the huge moving objects behind Jiang Pengji's army. What is that? What the hell is that? Because of their poor eyesight in the distance, they did not see clearly what the 5 moving objects were. However, they did not have time to think about this problem very soon. The audience in the streaming room adjusted their viewing angle and were stunned. Chun-Li, damn, it's a catapult. Chi-Yun, the streamer wants to go to heaven. You're using such a brutal catapult to attack Chang'an district? Jiang Pengji would stream every day. It was no exception when she was busy with the siege equipment. The audience in the streaming room more or less understood how terrifying the catapult she made was. It was a fixed-point attack. Not only could the soldiers control the landing position of the stone, but they could also adjust the distance. In theory, this kind of catapult could at most bear a stone of 150 kilograms. It could be thrown over a very long distance. When it landed, it could create a pit that was 2 to 3 meters deep. Using this thing to attack Chang'an district. Oh my, the streamer was not planning to attack the city. She was planning to be a demolition team and directly tear down the city walls of Chang'an district. In reality, she just wanted to let her subordinates witness the results of their lord's play with wood. In the future, technology would play an increasingly important role on the battlefield. However, the era of using human lives to fill the gap would one day pass. Jiang Nongqin commanded the artillery of the catapult to aim at the city walls of Chang'an district. She said in a hoarse voice, "Fire." There was a buzzing sound. 5 huge stones flew toward the city walls like meteorites from outer space. Bang, 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 bang. 5 consecutive sounds rang out. The seemingly sturdy city walls were destroyed like a knife cutting through tofu. Chapter 507. Nowadays, the city walls were not as hard as iron as people thought, and they were not built with regular boulders. They were built with stones, yellow mud, glutinous rice juice, lime, and other materials. Chang'an district was just a small and remote district in the north. How hard could the city walls be? It was not a problem to block normal attacks, but it was a little difficult to deal with the catapult that Jiang Pengji had modified. What she used was a giant catapult. Theoretically, it could even make a deep hole in the city wall of Shangjing, not to mention the city wall of Chang'an district. Although the city wall was strong, the power of the extraterrestrial emissaries was beyond imagination. Even the demolition team wasn't that brutal. Apart from Jiang Pengji, Zhang Ping, and the audience in the streaming room, no one knew it was so powerful. Jintian Wugang, damn, this catapult reminds me of the Xiangyang cannon used by the Mongolians when they attacked Xiangyang city. It's also a type of counterweight catapult. It said that it's very powerful and can create a 2-meter deep pit on the ground. This is the first gung. Yeah, isn't the original model of the catapult the Xiangyang cannon? Zhou. I'm not sure. I watched the live stream for the past few days, and the host made changes based on the current situation. Anyway, a liberal arts student wouldn't be able to understand such a complicated design. They only knew that the streamer and Zhang Ping from the MO family had a long discussion. Jiang Nongqin calmly directed the catapult to throw 5 rounds. The city wall was already riddled with holes. The Tsingyi army on the wall had suffered heavy casualties. They lacked sufficient bows and arrows and had lost the high ground. They were unable to mount an effective resistance to the subsequent assault. Jiang Pengji ordered the catapult to stop throwing stones. She issued a few military orders in succession. More than 10 elevator ladders were pushed out from the military formation. The ladders of this era were only sturdier and longer ladders. They did not have the function of protecting the vanguard of a siege. In a siege battle, the attacking side would usually suffer more losses than the defending side. This was because if the attacking side wanted to get close to the city walls, they would have to put themselves in the attacking range of the defending side. The other side had the geographical advantage, so the attacking side would often have to pile up the lives of the soldiers, set up ladders, and then forcibly attack the city walls or break the city gates. Naturally, the casualty rate was very high. Of course, if the attacking party chose to dig a tunnel and sneak into the city, it would be a different story. She was planning to destroy the city with brute force, so she was too lazy to let people dig tunnels like field mice. When Jiang Pengji was building the ladder, she referred to the existing information and literature in this world and built her ladder on this basis. There are circular rollers made of hardwood at the bottom of the elevator ladder, which could be used as solid tires to facilitate the movement of the entire ladder. As for why there was a lift function, she had 2 considerations. Firstly, the scale of the ladder was too large, which could easily alert the enemy scouts and reveal the secret of their armaments. If she could fold the ladder, it would greatly reduce the possibility of exposure. The defenders would think that she did not prepare any siege weapons, and they might let their guard down. Secondly, the height of the city walls throughout the era was not the same. Some of the city walls were majestic, such as the former Shanjing city. Some of the city walls were just mounds of earth that were slightly higher than the earthen walls. The elevator could adjust the height according to the situation of the city walls. Apart from these details, the biggest breakthrough was the structure of the base of the ladder, which could hide people. When the soldiers pushed the ladder, they could hide inside or under the ladder. They could use heavy shields to resist the attacks on the city walls. With a shelter, even if the enemy shot a rain of arrows, the soldiers pushing the ladder could still successfully put the ladder on the city walls. The Tsingyi army on the city walls had already been wiped out, and the successors had not had time to replenish, so the danger of climbing the city walls was the lowest. She gave a military order, and the horn sounded again with a different rhythm. The infantry of the vanguard battalion, who had suppressed their fighting spirit, climbed up the ladder first. They jumped up faster than monkeys. Which man did not want to make contributions, especially when they saw that the female battalion was more agile than them. If the male soldiers did not live up to expectations, how could they look at their faces? When the Tsingyi army sent people to support them, it was already a little late. The soldiers in leather armor pulled out their broadswords and slashed people. There was a chaotic battle on the city walls. More and more soldiers climbed up the city walls with the help of the ladder. They gradually gained the advantage of numbers. Although the Tsingyi army was a group of dragons without a leader, there were still many small leaders. Now it was too late to escape. They could only try their best to defend the city gates and block the enemy outside as much as possible. Only then would they have a chance of survival. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that in a short period of time, the number of soldiers that could climb up the ladders was limited. As long as they guarded the city gates and did not break, and concentrated their forces to deal with the people on the city walls, it was not impossible for the Tsingyi army to defend Chang'an district. Well, they were dreaming. Dozens of soldiers carried a round log that required 3 people to hug it. They were prepared to break open the tightly shut city gates. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The soldiers silently recited the number. When they counted to 3, they exerted their strength together. Previously, the catapult had smashed the city walls and more or less affected the city gates. After the soldiers attacked the city gates together for more than 10 times, the city gates broke open, revealing more than 100 Tsing army soldiers and various obstacles behind the gates. The troops from both sides fought at the city gates, and the sounds of killing were incessant. Fresh blood splattered, and broken limbs and bones were everywhere. The blood that flowed out converged into a gurgling stream, like a meandering red snake. In the battle at the city gates, the Tsing army was utterly defeated. They were simply unable to form an effective defense and attack. The troops attacked the city gates. Dozens of peculiar-looking rolling chariots were put to use. The chariots looked very simple. They lifted the cover hanging on them and revealed the true appearance of the chariots. There were 21 spears that were 7 to 8 feet long stuck in the front of the chariots. The tips were extremely sharp, and the sides were full of sharp short blades. The troops saw the situation and retreated. They ordered their comrades at the back to push the chariots to the front of the troops and rush into the city. This kind of chariot was specially used to fight in the alleys after the city was breached. It was like a hedgehog with sharp thorns. It was difficult for the enemy to get close. The Tsing army was like a group of dragons without a leader. The small chieftains did not even have time to escape. How could they organize an effective defense on the battlefield? The troops on Jiangpingji's side first broke the high walls outside. They pushed into the inner city as if they were cutting vegetables and tofu. They left a bloody path along the way. The Tsing army fled when they saw people. They even squeezed into a corner and trampled on them. Their faces were full of fear and despair. Compared to the Tsing army who had not eaten their fill for a few days, Jiangpingji did not treat her troops harshly. Not to mention how good the food was, at least it would not make anyone tighten their belts and go to the battlefield with hunger. Meng Hun had not seen blood for a long time. When the city was breached, he led his men and rushed to the front. Li Yin was not to be outdone. He rode his horse and rushed into the city gates of Chang'an district. Relying on his dexterity, he killed many members of the Tsing army who could not escape in time. He waved his silver spear countless times. Dazzling blood splattered everywhere. The blood even dyed the white horse he was riding on red. Chapter 508. Jiangpingji heaved a long sigh. If she could, she really did not want to bring these little princesses into battle in the future. Even if she had to, she could only bring those who were soft-hearted and easy to talk to. Look at these two people. They were so bold that they even dared to stop their lord from entering the battlefield. How disgraceful. Oomph. She gazed at the gates of Chang'an district in the distance. Her hands that were holding onto the reins felt a little itchy, and Dabai couldn't help but snort restlessly. Wei Ci pretended not to know what his lord was feeling emotional about. Even though he could not bear to do so, he still held it in. Blades and swords had no eyes on the battlefield. Even if she had been victorious in every battle, she could not guarantee that she would be unscathed. With the passage of time, who could guarantee that these accumulated old injuries would not become hidden dangers in the future? Su Ku, on the other hand, could not stay calm. Jiangpingji's resentful gaze made him feel guilty. He braced himself and said, "My lord, you can't put yourself in danger so easily." Jiangpingji secretly curled her lips. Even if she thought with her toes, she would know that it was a lame reason. "I alone can fight against hundreds of people," she said. "If that's the case, I would rather the Lord order another few hundred soldiers to participate in the battle." Wei Ci, who was standing at the side, interjected quietly. Jiangpingji was speechless. This Wei Ci was exceptionally vengeful. So he really had a grudge against her? In terms of combat power, she could break the gates of Cheng and county all by herself. There was no need for dozens of soldiers to carry the huge logs. Looking at the strenuous posture of the soldiers banging on the door, Jiang Pengji wished she could chase them aside and let them see what absolute strength was. However, Wei Xiai and Su Ku, the two scholars who had no strength to truss a chicken, stared at her from both sides and did not allow her to act rashly. Her resentment seemed to be able to pass through the live broadcast screen, and the audience could not help but laugh. Some audience members could still give her some face and just smiled. Some audience members were more mischievous and directly sent bullet screens to mock her. Mian, Beauty Ci and Brother Su could did a great job. The streamer is so unrestrained that she needs to be disciplined. Ginseng Kuei, Sai, even through the screen, I can feel the host's resentment rising to the sky. The two strategists were cruel enough to make someone who couldn't sit still obediently stay in the middle of the army. It was on me locking up my husky and not taking it for a walk. Sure, Yuka. That's a metaphor. You're really ruthless. Huskies are so cute. Why do you treat them so cruelly? Durian Cake. Husky, his nickname is gone. This was so fitting with the host's image. The two strategists must not let the host succeed. Once she was released into the battlefield, who knew if they would be able to catch her again? Once he was soft-hearted, there would be countless times in the future. Jiang Pengji's fan group was given the nickname Husky after the nickname Jiang Bapi. But thinking about it carefully, there was nothing wrong with this nickname. Both of them liked to play around. The pitiful Jiang Pengji could not enter the battlefield. The people on the battlefield kept chasing after the Tsing-Yi army for military merits. Because of the Tsing-Yi army's rampage and cruelty, the people of Chang'an district who could leave had all left. Those who could not leave were the old, the weak, the sick, and the disabled. A small number of people could not survive the bitter cold last year. When they were discovered one morning, they had already become cold and stiff corpses. The people who survived the winter still had to endure the threat of hunger and the harsh treatment of the Tsing-Yi army. Their lives were extremely difficult. If it was not necessary, these people would not easily open their doors. Therefore, when Jiang Pengji's troops attacked Chang'an district, the doors of the houses on the streets were tightly shut. Some houses had collapsed during the earthquake in Shanjing. No one repaired them. The entire street was deserted. Not only there, but other places as well. The entire Chang'an district was like a dead city. It made people feel cold. Of course, this was the best situation for the troops. Why? Because there were military orders in the military camp. Every soldier had to memorize them by heart and recite them fluently. Among them, there was a band that said, all soldiers are not allowed to disturb the people, plunder the people, rob the people, or kill the innocent when attacking the city. There were hundreds of them. According to the content of the ban, there were different degrees of punishment after violating it. Although there were special ways to deal with it during special times, it also gave people the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. It would be difficult to deal with if things got out of hand. Now that the streets in the city were quiet, it was very convenient for the troops. Very soon, they pushed into the inner city and killed the Tsing-Yi army who were living a drunken life. Many of them were still intoxicated by their gentleness. Before they could react, they had already fallen to the ground. The Tsing-Yi army liked to enjoy themselves. They burned, killed, and looted many times. If that was all, it would be fine. They even forcibly recruited prostitutes in the camp. They let women from good families enter the brothel to serve the Tsing-Yi army. This brothel was set up in the inner city. When the troops broke into the place, they were immediately stunned by the scene inside. The brothel in front of them was made up of more than 10 rows of small thatched huts. There were more than 20 thatched huts in a row. Each thatched hut was independent. A naked woman was tied to each hut. A thick hemp rope was tied around their necks. In another corner, there were dirty plates. Mosquitoes and flies were hovering above the plates. Most of the women were curled up in the corner of the thatched hut, like dogs in a kennel. Jiang Nongqin's cold and hoarse voice carried a chilling anger. All male soldiers leave. Those who disobey will be punished for violating the ban. As soon as she finished speaking, more than 10 blood-stained female soldiers quickly took over the brothel. Each of them held a long spear in their hands. Their expressions were cold. They cleaned up the drunken members of the Tsing army. They mercilessly threw their corpses aside and chased away their male comrades. It was not that Jiang Nongqin did not trust her comrades. She just did not trust the men. Some of the soldiers were indeed infuriated by the women's bodies. However, the flames of war had not been extinguished. There were also female soldiers eyeing them covetously at the side. The commandant of the female battalion, Jiang Nongqin, was still holding the fort. Everyone shuddered at the thought of the band in the military camp. They were no longer charming. At that moment, a shout that sounded like a pig being slaughtered caught everyone's attention. An extremely tall and strong man came out of a thatched hut. There were more than 10 heads of the Tsing army on his waist. They were tied together with a string of things and piled up together. The sight of them made one's scalp tingle. Not only that, everyone also noticed that his palm, which was as big as a cattail leaf fan, seemed to be grabbing something. Everyone stretched their necks to take a closer look. It turned out to be a soldier who had taken off his pants, revealing his penis. Jiang Nongqin's face darkened. The strong man threw the soldier out like he was throwing trash. The soldier's body rolled on the ground a few times before he stopped. He felt that all the bones in his body were about to be broken. This person has committed the felony of adultery. He should be beaten to death in front of the entire army, the strong man said in a deep voice. Jiang Nongqin clenched the knife on her waist tightly. If not for the military order, she really wanted to hack the soldier to death. I didn't. Chapter 509. Jiang Nongqin sneered and glanced at the filth below him. No, who would believe that? The soldier reacted to her glare. His little brother seemed to raise its head. He was about to enjoy the beauty and did not expect the strong man to come in. He was shocked. Not only did the strong man come in, but the strong man even pulled him down from the beauty. He was so scared that he shriveled. Really didn't. The soldier glanced at his little brother in embarrassment and hurriedly pulled up his pants that had fallen to his calf. Then he said, "It's obvious that this fool deliberately framed me. I know that it's forbidden by the military order. Why would I do such a thing?" The soldier spoke confidently, but the marks on his body were obviously wrong. Jiang Nongqin shifted her gaze to the strong man and questioned him with her eyes. The strong man pulled a long face and said embarrassedly, "This person did violate the military order. However, the person in the house is not a woman, but a man." The soldier heard this and immediately became confident. He said, "Officer Jiang, did you hear that? I really didn't violate the military order." Jiang Nongqin sneered and walked forward quickly. She lifted her leg and kicked the soldier's face, pressing him to the ground. "Arrest him. He violated the military order. We'll wait for the Lord's decision after the war." Hearing this, the soldier showed a desperate expression and could not help but cry out. He did not do anything to the women here. He just saw a good-looking man and could not help it. Was this considered a violation of the military order? Jiang Nongqin looked down, and there was a penetrating chill in her eyes. The military order states that one must not rape the people. What the people? Do you think that only women are the people and men are not? You still don't repent for violating the military order and still want to argue. Drag him out. 2 female soldiers stepped forward. The soldier still wanted to struggle and resist. It was at this moment that he felt a sharp pain coming from his shoulders. His arms felt like they were broken, and he lost control and feeling. He couldn't even move his fingers, let alone struggle with his hands. His lower jaw was dislocated by one of them. Jiang Nongqin looked at him in disgust. Drag him out. She was in a bad mood when she encountered such a thing. However, she secretly nodded at the 2 female soldiers' skillful methods. Although they were still a little immature, they didn't have much strength in their hands. It was already pretty good that they could do this. The soldier who made a mistake was dragged away like a piece of trash. Jiang Nongqin finally had the time to look up at the burly man who caught the soldier. "What's your name?" Her gaze was focused on the head hanging on the man's shoulder and waist, and she frowned. "I am Dian Yin, a recruit from the 3rd Battalion." The burly man lowered his head in a respectful manner. However, he was much taller than Jiang Nongqin, so he looked like he was looking down at her. Dian Yin? This name was somewhat familiar. Jiang Nongqin thought about it, and finally remembered who Dian Yin was. Li Yin was particularly concerned about this new recruit called Dian Yin. She asked him about it out of curiosity, and he said that he was the person the Lord wanted. According to Jiang Pengji's instructions, Dian Yin was supposed to be transferred to her side after the first phase of the recruit camp training ended. However, the moment the recruit camp training ended, Xianyang District entered a state of preparation for war. Li Yin transferred Dian Yin to the 3rd Battalion to give him a chance to render meritorious service. But isn't this person too honest? Even if it was Jiang Nongqin, looking at the pile of heads hanging on his back and waist, she couldn't help but feel her scalp tingle. Jiang Nongqin said, "You don't have to chop off all the heads. The Lord doesn't like such a rough method. War was war, but there was no need to deliberately torment the enemy's corpses. Firstly, there was no time, and secondly, it was a pain in the ass." Dian Yin said in a tiger's voice, "Didn't you say that the reward is based on the number of heads?" Jiang Nongqin laughed involuntarily and said, "In ancient times, there was a famous general who could kill 1,000 people in one battle. But military merits aren't just based on the number of heads. If that's the case, what if the soldiers behead innocent people to make up the numbers, to fool others?" Dian Yin couldn't answer her. He just thought that was how it was said, and it was done in real battles. Dian Yin thought for a moment. He removed the string of heads and threw them on the ground. One by one, the heads fell to the ground with a dull thud. Yet, his expression remained the same. This caused many of the female soldiers to feel a chill in their hearts. They wished they could stay a little further away from this terrifying, burly man. He ran around with so many heads hanging on his neck. Wasn't he afraid? The facts prove that Dian Yin was really not afraid, especially when the heads came from the Tsingyi army. He only felt that his anger had been vented. "Yes, I understand," Jiang Nongqin said. "Now this place has been sealed off by the women's camp. Men are not allowed to enter. You can go out now. As for the heads on the ground, no one can erase your merit as a brave man who is not afraid of danger. I will mention you in front of the Lord." Dian Yin didn't need to do that, but since the captain had spoken, he accepted it. Ever since that unknown female soldier overturned the whole new camp, Dian Yin, who never looked down on women, dare not look down on them. Just like the captain just now, even someone like Dian Yin felt a chill from the bottom of his bones when he was stared at by the other party. It was a very subtle aura, commonly known as a murderous aura. Bystanders couldn't feel it, but martial artists practiced martial arts, so their senses were far sharper than ordinary people. That captain was probably a person who killed indiscriminately and had countless blood debts on his hands. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to train such a strong, murderous aura. The Tsingyi army was defeated, and Jiang Pengji's soldiers took the opportunity to expand their victory. Those from the Tsingyi army who could be held captive were captured. Those who could not be held captive were killed. Those who disobeyed the orders of the military camp were arrested on the spot. Wei Ci thought that it would take at least a day to conquer Chang'an District. In reality, it didn't take that long. It was only half a day. The situation in the city was already under control. 9 leaders of the Tsingyi army were arrested. According to their confessions, another 12 people escaped. Meng Hun and the rest had already sent troops to chase after them. Jiang Pengji rode white into the city. The streets and alleys were still tightly shut, but her perception was very strong. She was very clear about how many pairs of eyes were secretly observing from the surrounding houses. She didn't care. Anyway, Chang'an District had been conquered. It was hers. Accustomed to the cleanliness and prosperity of Xianyang District, the audience in the streaming room felt an indescribable discomfort when they saw Chang'an District. The contrast between the two was like the difference between a first-tier city and a small village deep in the mountains. However, according to the previous streaming content, Chang'an District was the most prosperous place in Fengyi County. How many captives were captured? Jiang Pengji was welcomed into the district headquarters of Chang'an District. The inside had been roughly tidied up, but there were still faint black bloodstains on the ground. Upon a closer look, one could even see broken limbs and bones. She sat upright, as if nothing had happened. Other than the Tsing-E army who were killed and those who escaped from the other side of the city gate, the total number of captives is about 1,800. 1,800. Jiang Pengji's current army had a total of nearly 10,000 people. It would be a huge expense to feed these captives. Wei Si asked, "What does my lord intend to deal with these?" Chapter 510. Wei Si muttered, "That's a good idea, but the Tsing-E army claims to have 200,000 members. There will definitely be more captives in the future. Could it be that the Lord intends to throw all the captives into the mines? Even if the iron mine is rich, it won't last long. Once the number of captives exceeded a certain threshold, it would become a huge hidden danger. Being a mine laborer was bound to be tough. If they were to mine for a lifetime, it was hard to guarantee that the captives would not think of ways to unite and cause trouble. There could not be fewer captives. Many manual labor required captives, but there could not be too many. If there were too many captives, they would be shooting themselves in the foot. If they wanted to have a good reputation and become a truly benevolent ruler, they even had to think of a way to properly arrange their future. Wei Si hoped that his lord could not only do a good deed, but also gain a good reputation. She did not want to be at a disadvantage like before. He would not act smart and make a decision for her. Firstly, he had no intention of doing so. Secondly, Her Majesty was not the type to be controlled by others. Once or twice, she could accept his kindness with a smile and not bicker with him. But if he made his own decisions too many times, she couldn't tolerate that person. Therefore, Wei Si only brought up this point. As for how to make the decision, it was entirely up to her. Even if he did not say it, she would realize this when the number of captives in the camp increased in the future. Jiang Pengji thought about it and said, "Zhixiao's concern is not unreasonable. We can't let all the defeated troops become captives in the future." If one thought about it carefully, Jiang Pengji's words were quite arrogant. She had just conquered Xiangyang District and Chang'an District, and she had already determined that she was the ruler of the world. Was this not considered arrogant? Let's do it this way. These captives will be sent to mine for half a year. If they perform well and have no other misdeeds, they can be given a chance to redeem themselves. The captives were considered slaves. Even if they did not have an official household registration, they were still considered her personal property. These captives wanted to regain their freedom? Sure, they just had to think of a way to redeem themselves. Wei Si frowned and asked, "Redeem themselves? How do I redeem them?" Jiang Pengji said, "These captives of the Tsing-E army are different from the batch of captives half a year ago. Their style and behavior are very bad. If they're not properly trained, they can only be regarded as scum. They're not useful at all. It's better to let them mine for half a year and calm down." Of course, during this period, these captives were still slaves. They haven't caused any trouble in the past half a year, and their performance has been very good. Then give them a chance. They will temporarily be stationed as civilian soldiers and receive simple training. They will spend most of their time reclaiming the wasteland and plowing the fields. During the slack season, they could participate in other labor projects and would be given food or money according to the amount of work they did. If they can contribute to our army, we will remove their slave status and restore their freedom. Jiang Pengji was naturally unwilling to keep a group of useless captives. If he squeezed their labor, it would also become a hidden danger. It was better to tighten and loosen them, giving them some sweetness and hope. This was not the final verdict, but it gave everyone a general direction for how to deal with the captives. There were too many abandoned fields in the north. Last year, there was such a huge earthquake. Many fields were uncultivated. Because of the Tsing-E army, Chang'an District missed last year's autumn harvest and this year's spring plowing. This meant that there was almost no harvest for 2 years. There were many fields, but little food. Who knew how many people were still suffering from hunger? Jiang Pengji had a lot of points of popularity at the moment. She could create a lot of food, but she did not rely on this channel. A normal and healthy force should be self-sufficient and even have abundant food. Not only could it feed the people, but it could also have enough money and food to fight a war. Although it was easy to exchange for food in the mall, without a complete food production system, they would starve to death without the system. Don't forget, she only imprisoned the subsystem. The main body was still hidden in the corner of this world. Not only that, according to her probing of the system a few times, the points of popularity should have other uses. Due to these considerations, Jiang Pengji felt that these captives should work hard to shine and not be idle. Suka pondered for a while. He was quite moved by Jiang Pengji's suggestion. She gave the slaves a chance to redeem themselves, but she did not seal off all their escape routes. If these captives were motivated and repentant and performed well for half a year, they could be stationed as civilian soldiers and plowed the fields for the army. The autumn harvest food would be distributed between the government and the people. As for the ratio between the two, Jiang Pengji would not be too harsh. If the farming tools, seeds, and cattle were provided by the government would take 40% and the people would get 60%. If the farming tools, seeds, and cattle were provided by each household, the government would take 30% and the people would get 70%. The fields would be owned by the government. During the slack season, the soldiers would be sent to be instructors to teach them how to fight and kill the enemy. They also had the opportunity to go to the battlefield. If they could make contributions, they could even be freed from slavery according to their contributions. If these people did not have such intentions and only wanted to be ordinary people, they could take part in other paid jobs during the slack season. If they worked for a few years, they could even buy their own fields. The government would take 10% and the people would get 90%. Jiang Pengji shared her thoughts with the two strategists. The more she spoke, the more ideas she had. Her thinking became more active. Her soldiers also had the habit of working during the autumn harvest and spring plowing. Last year, Xianyang district reclaimed too much wasteland. Each household was allocated a lot of fields. They could not keep up with the work. The spring plowing was so short. It would be a pity to miss it. If God was kind this year, the autumn harvest food could not only feed her army, but also feed the entire Xianyang district. There would still be a surplus. However, her soldiers were mainly trained. Farming and other labor were auxiliary. The civilian soldiers were mainly farmed and worked as laborers. Training was secondary. Even if their combat qualities were not high, they were still better than ordinary people. However, Suka frowned and asked, "This distribution ratio seems to be too lenient. The government provided the farming tools, seeds, and cattle. No matter what, the profits should be 50% and not 40%. After all, the fields did not belong to the people. They did not have to pay for renting the fields. According to the Lord, the grain collected by the government included the grain tax. In this way, the ratio was much lower than the grain tax today. You can't calculate it this way. It's not much if you really calculate it." Wei Si could see the situation clearly. "I guess the Lord doesn't plan to pay the civilian soldiers? Even if she does, I think it will be much lower than our soldiers." The grain distributed to the civilian soldiers was indeed theirs. It was for their own consumption. The government did not pay them. If war came and the enemy attacked, they would have to take up arms to defend. In other words, it was equivalent to them farming, raising themselves, paying themselves, and going to the battlefield to fight. In Wei Si's memory of the Golden Age, the current tax ratio was a little harsh. However, the most attractive thing about it was that the impoverished captives had the opportunity to buy their own land after some hard work. They would take 1/10 of the grain tax, which was what Jiang Pengji had mentioned earlier. The government would take 10% of the grain tax, and the people would get 90% of the grain tax. Chapter 511. Wei Si looked at his lord and sighed with emotion. In his previous life, the Lord was best at war. Whoever provoked her, she would fight back even if she had to fight with everything she had. But now, the Lord seemed to be even better at painting a big picture. Her ability to pacify people's hearts was even better. If the Lord in the past could be so shrewd, why did she have to be like that? First, she used household registration and marriage to stabilize the hearts of the women in the female camp, slightly reversing the prejudice of the people in Xianyang district against the female camp, and stimulating the female soldiers' desire to fight for fame and fortune. Now, she came up with this method of farming to appease the captives and stabilize the hearts of the people in the rear, so that they would work for her wholeheartedly. The household registration of the female soldiers and marriage after retirement were not in sight yet, but everyone in the female camp was fighting to go to the battlefield. According to Meng Hun of the Vanguard Battalion, these female soldiers were incredible. They were so ruthless in killing that even the men could not help but tremble. Similarly, the method of farming was only a verbal plan. The captives needed to be mining observation period for half a year. Then they had to cultivate wastelands for the government. After the cultivation, they had to work in the fields and participate in other manual labor. Finally, they had to pay a high grain tax. Based on this analysis, it seemed that the captives were at a disadvantage. But Wei Ci dared to guarantee with his head that if this plan was spread, they would not have to worry about the captives rioting or taking the opportunity to rebel. The captives would only work hard for the 1 in 10 grain tax and be deeply grateful to the Lord. His lord's painting skills were getting better and better. Wei Ci complained that Jiang Pengji loved to paint big pies, but he also knew that the pies she painted could be eaten in the end. What do you think of this idea? Jiang Pengji spoke until her mouth was dry. She raised her hand to untie the water pouch at her waist and gulped down 2 mouthfuls. Suka pondered for a while. He was born a commoner, so his heart was naturally more biased towards the interests of the people. However, he was also Jiang Pengji's strategist. He had to always put her interests as the first standard. His lord had already spoken about the well-being of the people. Under such circumstances, Suka naturally would not propose to increase the proportion of grain harvests. He praised sincerely, "This is a very good plan. It can definitely restore the livelihood of the people in a short time. My lord is very kind." Dongqing has been plagued by natural disasters in recent years. Last year, there was an earthquake, and there was an extreme shortage of food. In addition, the Red Lotus Group and the Tsing-Yi army were in a frenzy of fighting, causing the agriculture in the north of Dongqing to be greatly damaged. The people's livelihood was poor, and the people did not have enough to eat. Sometimes, they would exchange their children for food. If Jiang Pengji's method of stationing fields was implemented, not only could the people's livelihood be restored in a short period of time, but the people who had lost their land could also return to the fields to work. They could also hoard a large amount of military rations, and they would no longer have to worry about not having enough rations during the war. This was just one of the benefits. Another benefit was the effect of the army farming law. It could attract a large number of refugees who could no longer survive. In troubled times, the people in the territory were the capital. With a large population, would they have to worry about not being able to recruit enough soldiers? Su Ku and Wei Ci were both far-sighted people. They not only saw the benefits in front of them, but also the benefits in the future. Not only were the two strategists deep in thought to further perfect the method that their lord had come up with on the spur of the moment, the audience in the live stream was also discussing endlessly. Dijio Nong Sai, you shallow people, you only love other people's faces, but I'm different from you. I only love the streamer's talent. Every time she seriously thinks and solves a difficult problem, that look is so handsome that I can't close my legs. Chiue, Chiu Piao. The person above, don't interrupt me. Even a love-struck fool has to choose the right time. Why does the army farming law that the streamer mentioned sound so familiar? It feels like it was Boss Chow's subordinates, Zhao Ji and Han Hao, who suggested Boss Chow to set up this army farming law. Nyang Eunuch Joma. The person above, you're right, but the two seem to be very different, right? Tumi Dalao. I checked on Baidu, it's really different, right? Boss Chow's army farming law greatly restricted the freedom of the farmers. They were almost bound to the land, and their lives were very hard. The government collected a ratio of either 50% or 60%. In the later period, the exploitation was very serious, reaching a ratio of 80% to 20%. The farmers rebelled and fled. Later on, the land was heavily invaded, and the army farming law was basically abolished. Shizhua Xinghuang. How should I say this? After reading the information on Baidu, I only have one thought. Leave a way out in life so that we can meet again in the future. Even if the farmers were just captives, refugees, or slaves, they couldn't be 100% cut off from their livelihood. The tolerance of the people in ancient times was beyond imagination. As long as they weren't forced to the point where they couldn't live, they wouldn't resist at all. They would only choose to accept adversity. Yawu Yanling. That's why I said that the streamer's ability to trick people is really strong, and it's worth learning. She asked them to reclaim the ownerless land, provided some small things during the reclamation, and waited for them to harvest a big share of the profits. The people were still grateful to her. Suifeng Xiaosa. It's not a trick, is it? For this chaotic world, the streamer is already considered a very good person. Jiang Pengji frowned, and her gaze drifted past the words exploitation in the later period. The farmers rebelled and fled, and land invasion. At that moment, a viewer asked her, Yinshu Dababeo, why did the streamer suddenly think of this? Jiang Pengji thought about it and shared her thoughts. Streamer V, my troops will help the people farm when they're busy with the spring plowing and autumn harvest. This can be considered an inspiration. In addition, there are many records of farming in the book given by Mr. Chang Chung, but the scale is very small, so farming in the field is not well known. To the common people of ancient times, the method of farming that she spoke of was perhaps astonishing. But according to Jiang Pengji's thinking, this suggestion was logical. As Wei Ci said, no matter how rich the iron mine was, it would be dug out one day. How would the captives be settled then? There would be more and more captives in the future. Would they all be thrown into the mines? Regardless of whether they were captives or ordinary people, they were all on the same side to her. She had the obligation to take care of these people. Jiang Pengji's taking care of them was not to prepare food and resources and let them stay at home to eat and drink and wait for death. Her taking care of them was to exploit the labor force of the person to the greatest extent and develop their ability to contribute to society so that they could support themselves. If the person was useless, Jiang Pengji would give up on such a person. This was the same as what Jiang Nongqin had said before. Those who were willing to save themselves could be saved, but those who were unwilling to save themselves were hopeless. From another perspective, this could be considered as an alternative interpretation of teaching a man to fish was better than teaching a man to fish. If the captives had nothing else to do, they would help the army to open up wastelands and learn how to grow food. In Jiang Pengji's previous life, the Federation pursued the idea that every citizen was a soldier. Every citizen had a certain amount of combat power. Similarly, she hoped that her people were as valiant as them. They did not need to have high combat power, but they must be able to fight. From this, it could be seen that they should learn how to fight when they were idle. When the above ideas were put together, the embryonic form of the farming method could basically be formed. Chapter 512. Jiang Pengji looked around, and her gaze fell on Qiguan Rang, who was sitting in the corner. He was still holding the feather fan that never left his hand. He squinted his eyes slightly, as if he was listening attentively, but also as if he was daydreaming. Jiang Pengji directly called him out. She asked, "What do you think of this method, Wanzhong?" From the day Jiang Pengji met Qiguan Rang, she knew of his bad habits. If it was not necessary, he would never stand out. He would even deliberately reduce his presence. TSK. Did this guy cherish his life too much? Was he afraid that he would be killed if he performed too well? Qiguan Rang naturally did not get distracted. On the contrary, he listened very seriously. He even carefully considered the pros and cons of the method. Obviously, the implementation of this method today definitely had more pros than cons. However, after a long time, it was hard to say. The land belonged to the government, and the proportion of taxes was completely decided by Jiang Pengji alone. To put it blasphemously, if she was no longer in this world, and her successor had a bad temperament, what if he recklessly increased the proportion of taxes? This was one of the reasons. The other was the aristocratic families. They had absolute wealth and power. Even if the people found a way to buy their own land, could they keep this family business? Not to mention the distant past. Now that Dongqing's land annexation was serious, how many people sold their land under the coercion of others and became tenant farmers? A bloody lesson was in front of them. However, even though he thought of this, Qiguan Reng did not want to bring it up at this time, because there was not much meaning in bringing it up. The Lord needed to become stronger in a short period of time. The people also needed to recover from the heavy blows as soon as possible and live a stable and prosperous life. The drawbacks of the method would only be revealed in the later stages. He had not even learned to crawl. What was the point of thinking about things after running? Jiang Pengji did not give him the opportunity. She said, "If you have anything on your mind, just say it. I won't laugh at you. You don't have to hide it from me. Just say whatever you have on your mind. If you can't come up with anything, don't even think about taking a break when you go back." The corners of Qiguan Reng's mouth twitched slightly. After a while, he spoke of his previous thoughts. After a while, he said shyly, "I'm just worrying for nothing. Given the current situation, the Lord's army farming method is the best." Jiang Pengji relaxed her brows and said, "You're not worrying for nothing." The biggest difference between taking precautions and worrying for nothing is that the former may happen in a short period of time, while the latter will only happen in the distant future, or even impossible. In at most a decade or two, she could turn the entire era upside down. So Qiguan Reng's worries were not wrong. "I'll remember what you said." After Jiang Pengji finished speaking, she turned away Ci and Suku and said, "We'll stop here for now. Go back and sort things out. After this battle, we'll make some adjustments according to the actual situation." Jiang Pengji knew that the best might not be the most suitable. Only those that fit this era would be the most suitable. Wei Ci and Suko bowed and said, "Yes." After a while, the guard reported that Jiang Nongqin, the commandant of the female battalion, had requested to see him. Under the leadership of Meng Hun and Li Yun, the vanguard battalion was wiping out the remnants of the Tsingyi army. What was Jiang Nongqin doing here now? Jiang Pengji frowned and allowed her to enter. Jiang Nongqin greets the Lord. After Jiang Nongqin entered, she solemnly bowed and found a place to sit after getting permission. Jiang Pengji asked, "Nongqin, what happened?" She reported in a low voice, "I've cleaned up the military discipline and caught 32 people who broke the rules. Among them, there's a person who committed a serious crime." Jiang Pengji was very strict with military discipline. Considering their physiological needs, she did not restrict the male soldiers from getting married. Secondly, she did not restrict them from seeking pleasure during their break. She had already done so. If the soldiers committed a serious crime during the war, she would definitely not let them off lightly. Hearing Jiang Nongqin's words, her voice became cold. "You can deal with the remaining 31 people according to the military rules. Only this person who committed a serious crime. What did he do wrong?" Jiang Nongqin said, "The crime of adultery. The Lord once said that the soldiers are not allowed to adulterate the people. Otherwise, they will be punished with a serious crime." Jiang Pengji's good mood instantly disappeared. Her lips curled into a cold smile that was filled with murderous intent. "The crime of adultery?" she said. "For such a serious crime, you could just order the whole army to watch and beat him to death." Listening to the conversation between the two, the three strategists present secretly frowned. The crime of adultery? According to the circumstances of the crime, it would be at least a death sentence. This kind of death was neat and tidy. The most serious way to die was to live a life worse than death. It was really a torture. Which soldier was so blind to commit a crime against the law? Jiang Nongqin said, "I agree with you. However, the person who this person violated is a little special. I don't know how the crime should be measured." Jiang Pengji frowned. Special identity? Could it be that the soldier did something to a troublesome big shot? Jiang Nongqin said, "It was a man." Everyone was stunned for a moment. The soldier was indeed a man. That was not right. Could it be that the person who committed the crime was from the female battalion? Forgive them for being a group of country bumpkins from the countryside. When the crime of adultery was mentioned, their first impression was that it was a man and a woman. If the victim was a man, the person who committed the crime should be from the female battalion. However, this did not make sense. Jiang Nongqin did not know how big of a misunderstanding she had caused. She repeated, that soldier was from the 3rd Battalion. The person he injured was a man who was captured by the Tsing-E army and sent to the brothel. He had a pretty face and seemed to be no different from a woman. My lord once said that the soldiers must not commit adultery to the people. That man was naturally counted as a person. Therefore, Nongqin thought that the crime of adultery could be established. Their worldview was shattered. Wei Xi, Qiguanrang, and Su Ku were dumbfounded. They looked at Jiang Nongqin as if she was a monster. They felt that they had opened the door to a new world. So could we play that way? Su Ku said embarrassedly, My lord, this is a little too absurd. Jiang Pengji glanced at Su Ku, then secretly glanced at Wei Xi. Speaking of which, this person's appearance was also very dangerous. It was more reassuring to send someone who could fight and was loyal to protect him. As a good lord who loved her subordinates, she gave herself a thumbs up. Jiang Pengji lowered her eyelids and said, Nongqin is right. A person is a person. Why does it matter about gender? Su Ku did not speak. Although he was a little shocked, his lord's words made sense. Just because the victim was a man and he was forced to have sex with someone, it could not be considered a crime. The soldier had indeed committed a serious crime. He realized that this was an opportunity to punish a person as an example to others. He could beat those who wanted to play word games and exploit loopholes in the language. Men were also a person. If his lord did not implement this rule, it would be lively in the future. Nowadays, men were in vogue. Becoming brothers could still be considered a beautiful story. Chapter 5:13. Such a bad precedent could not be allowed to be set. After figuring out the key points, the strategists remained silent and tacitly agreed to Jiang Pengji's punishment for the soldier who committed the crime. Jiang Pengji said seriously, he will be punished according to the military law. The whole army will watch the punishment. He will be beaten to death on the spot. Jiang Nongqin bowed and said solemnly, My lord is open-minded. I will obey your orders. The audience in the streaming room who was watching the whole process exploded. They really did not expect the matter to be settled just like that. Yinji Niao, what the F***CK did I hear wrongly? The male soldier's crime has been established? Shui Chao, Shang Tian Tiantai, someone who studies law, what kind of crime is this in our country? Bao Bao, elongation. Do you need me to explain to you the crime of rape in our country? The crime of rape refers to the act of using violence, coercion, or other means against the will of a woman to have sex with a woman, or to have sex with a girl under the age of 14 intentionally. This is the accurate definition of rape in our country's criminal law. Do you understand? Bao Bao Yiliankin, I understand. In other words, is it not a crime of rape for a woman to have sex with a man or a man to have sex with a man? Bao Bao Shashan Li, in theory it is, but it is still a crime. It is just not a crime of rape. Mama, as a man with a handsome face, I suddenly feel that our country is very dangerous. Can I apply to migrate to Mars? Bao Bao, Wang Jimo. Streamer, I feel that you can really go to heaven. When the female soldiers in your female battalion grow stronger, maybe you can consider setting up a men's protection association. After all, your female soldiers are very scary. If there is domestic violence, what will happen to the weak men and women? Bao Bao, Lu Zhanxian. By the way, am I really watching the streaming room in ancient times? The streamer's subordinates are very receptive. Jiang Pengji laughed involuntarily. It was not that they were receptive, it was obviously to prevent any loopholes in the language. Nowadays, men were prevalent in the world. The soldiers were ordered not to lay hands on civilian women. In order to vent their lust, they might lay hands on civilian men. Now there were signs. If they did not restrain themselves, it would be difficult to recruit soldiers in the future. Who would dare to come? Wei Xi and the others were only preventing people from taking advantage of loopholes and destroying the atmosphere. It was not to protect men's rights. They considered things with their own thinking, which was very different from the viewers in the streaming room. At that moment, Jiang Nongqin straightened her body and asked Jiang Pengji after some deliberation, "Does the Lord still remember a recruit named Dian Yin?" Dian Yin? Everyone present was no stranger to this name. After all, Dian Yin was either staying in the military camp or temporarily staying at Wei Si's house. Jiang Pengji said, "Of course I remember. I even told Han Mei that if Dian Yin completes his recruit training, he can be transferred to my side." After Wei Si heard this, he secretly glanced at his lord and sighed to himself that the fate between his lord and Dian Yin was indeed destined. "What's the matter with the recruit?" she asked. Jiang Nongqin told him what she saw. She said, "The soldier who committed a serious crime was caught by this person. When I saw him, I saw dozens of human heads hanging on his shoulders and waist. He was very brave. I think this person is a promising talent." Jiang Pengji's fingers tapped on the table. She originally wanted to wait for Dian Yan's training to end before transferring him to her side and nurturing him. This person was born to be a general. If he was properly nurtured, he would definitely become a talent. Now that he had made a name for himself on the battlefield, it was indeed time to promote him. Thinking of this, Jiang Pengji said, "I'll remember this." Conquering Qingan district required people everywhere. Dian Yin came forward himself. If she did not get a strong man to work for him, it would be a disgrace to her nickname of Jiang Bapi. Although there was a general idea of the army farming strategy, it was not easy to carry it out. Jiang Pengji planned to throw this matter to Li Yun, Dian Yin, and Su Ke. Li Yun had experience in reclaiming wasteland and was more familiar with farming. Dian Yin and Su Ke assisted him. While they were discussing, the sound of powerful footsteps came from outside the door. Jiang Pengji knew who they were. Wasn't it Meng Hun and Li Yun? "My lord, I have failed in my mission. I did not capture all the leaders of the Tsing army who escaped." Meng Hun apologized. Li Yun also looked ashamed. They sent people to chase after them, but they were not as familiar with the terrain as the Tsing army. Many of the leaders escaped. Wei Si glanced at Jiang Pengji. Her expression was very calm. He could not tell whether she was happy or angry. He asked Meng Hun, "Officer Meng, do you know which direction those thieves ran to?" Meng Hun thought for a while and said, "It should be the southwest." "The southwest?" Wei Si frowned. Su Ke and Qiguan Rank's expressions changed slightly. "It seems that we won't be able to rest for a while." The southwest was Maolin District, which was also the territory of the Tsing army. Now that they had taken over Chang'an District and Xianyang District, it was equivalent to the two districts separating Maolin District in the southwest and Jiaoping District in the northeast. It made it difficult for the Tsing army in Fengyi County to look around. They were unable to gather their troops in one place. It was very easy to break through. There were a total of 4 districts in Fengyi County. With Chang'an District as the center, Maolin District was in the southwest, and Jiaoping District was in the northeast. Xianyang District, which was owned by Jiang Pengji, bordered these 2 districts. It was located in the southeast of Chang'an District. From the map, it directly cut off the Tsing army in Fengyi County. Regardless of strategy or deployment, the Tsing army had the motive to attack Chang'an District or Xianyang District. If they attacked Chang'an District, it was equivalent to returning to the original state. However, Chang'an District had been ravaged by the Tsing army for a whole winter. There was not much to be gained. Instead of attacking the dilapidated Chang'an District, it was better to gather their troops and attack Xianyang District. Xianyang District was the largest district among the 4 districts in Fengyi County. Now that Jiang Pengji had governed it in an orderly manner, the people were rich and the products were abundant. How could the Tsing army not be envious? Taking advantage of the opportunity when the main force was still in Chang'an District, it was very likely that they would launch a sneak attack on the weaker Xianyang District. Su Ke asked, "My lord, are we sending troops back to assist now?" Jiang Pengji suddenly sneered and said, "Why should we send troops back to assist Xianyang District? We'll have quite a number of troops there." The siege equipment used for defense is also very sufficient. With Huayu and Luoyue guarding it, what do you think the possibility of losing the city is? Qiguan Rang tapped his feather fan leisurely and said, "My lord, are you thinking of giving them a taste of their own medicine?" Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes. Some malicious glint flashed in her eyes. If Jiaoping District and Maolin District really send troops to attack Xiangyang District, we'll go all the way. We'll directly split up our troops and destroy their lair. Everyone was speechless. That's amazing, my lord. Wei Ci chuckled helplessly. It seemed that he really could not restrict her from going to the battlefield in the future. Seeing that she had nowhere to vent her anger, the Tsing-Yi army became her punching bag. Her idea was quite good, but it was more conservative. She could only launch a sneak attack on either Jiaoping District or Maolin District. In order not to be obstructed by the strategists, she stubbornly chose to split up her troops to attack the city. The troops would be split into two. She would lead one group to launch a sneak attack, while the others would go to the other group to launch a sneak attack. Chapter 514. As it turned out, Wei Ci knew Jiang Pengji's temper quite well. It was as he had predicted. Send scouts to observe the movements of the Tsing-Yi army in Jiaoping District and Maolin District. Report to me immediately if there are signs of sending troops. Jiang Pengji squinted her eyes. She originally wanted to gradually encroach on the 4 districts of Fengyi County, step by step, steadily and surely. However, the Tsing-Yi army courted death and gave her such an opportunity. As long as they dared to attack Xiangyang District, she dared to make them lose their nest. Yes, Meng Hun accepted the order. I will obey. Most of the scouts were in the vanguard battalion. This task naturally fell to him. Suku said, "My lord, we don't have enough troops now. If we split our troops to attack Maolin District and Jiaoping District, I'm afraid we won't be able to do it." After he finished speaking, he secretly glanced at Qiguan Rang and Wei Ci, hoping that they would come forward to persuade their lord. However, Qiguan Rang also liked to take risks. Jiang Pengji's unconventional way of sending troops was more to his liking. As for Wei Ci, he knew that it was not easy to persuade his lord. If he dared to dissuade her this time, she would stir up more trouble next time. If the Tsing-Yi army wanted to attack Xiangyang District, based on a previous battle situation, they would definitely mobilize a lot of manpower. When Jiang Pengji first came to Xiangyang District, the Tsing-Yi army had 10,000 men stationed there. Didn't they still get wiped out by her? Therefore, if they went to Xiangyang District, they would just be sending themselves to die. They were not a threat at all. If they wanted to see the hope of breaking through Xiangyang District, they would have to mobilize most of their troops. The Tsing-Yi army's rear would definitely be weak. It was not impossible to occupy Jiaoping District and Maolin District at the same time, but it required courage and strong judgment. Suka saw that they refused to speak and immediately understood their intentions. He could only sigh faintly. He could not do anything alone. It was impossible to change his lord's decision. Jiang Pengji sat on the seat of honor and said, "This matter is temporarily settled. If the Tsing-Yi army in Jiaoping District and Maolin District sends troops, we will send troops to destroy their nest. If they know their place, we will allow them to be free and unfettered for a while." Whether to mobilize troops again depended on the actions of the Tsing-Yi army. Currently, Jiang Pengji was still facing the reconstruction of Chang'an District. Because of the experience of Xiangyang District, it was not difficult to rebuild Chang'an District. However, there were still many problems in front of her. The biggest problem was the people of Chang'an District. Because of the Tsing-Yi army's wanton disturbance, the young people who could escape had already thought of a way to escape. Now, most of the people who remained in the city were old, weak, sick, and disabled. Each of them was emaciated and sallow from hunger. Every household's rice jar had no stored food. Even if they had stored food, they did not dare to light a fire to cook. They were afraid that the smoke from the chimney would cause the Tsing-Yi army to plunder. They could only soak the uncooked rice in clear water and soften it slightly before eating it raw. Hearing the news from Su Ku and the others, Jiang Pengji's slightly cheerful mood became heavy. "How many people are there?" Jiang Pengji asked. "It is estimated that there will be no more than 3,000 people," Su Ku replied. What was more serious was that the 2,000 people were physically weak due to the long-term lack of salt intake. Even if Jiang Pengji provided them with food, not many of them could be used as effective labor force. In this way, the situation in Chang'an District was much worse than that in Xiangyang District. Now that they haven't figured out the movements of the Tsing Yi Army in Jiaoping District and Maolin District, they can't easily mobilize their troops in case they can't return in time to help. Jiang Pengji said, "I'll go and take a look myself." In another place, 31 troops who broke the law were punished. Fortunately, the circumstances were not very serious. They were just taught a harsh lesson. According to the military camp's rules, the only remaining soldier had to be beaten to death in front of at least one battalion of troops to serve as a warning to others. The person who carried out the punishment was Jiang Nongqin. The soldier was tied up and sent to the military training ground that was temporarily cleared. Jiang Nongqin read out the soldier's crime with a cold expression. All the troops were in an uproar. They had only heard that raping a woman was a crime, but they had never heard that raping a man would also be punished according to military law. However, the military law clearly stated that one could not rape a commoner. The victim was a commoner, so naturally, the soldier had broken the military law. Of course, the soldiers didn't say anything about the verdict, but they were still doubtful and opposed it in their hearts. The man was originally a member of the Tsing Yi Army's brothel. Was it considered a violation of military law to touch him? It couldn't be, right? However, they didn't dare to voice out their doubts. Instead, they silently remembered it in their hearts, in case they accidentally stepped on a mine in the future. According to military law, he'll be beaten to death. Jiang Nongqin read out coldly. Execute. There were a total of 4 people executing. 2 female soldiers held the soldier's left and right shoulders to prevent him from moving and escaping. The other 2 female soldiers held rods in their hands and beat him to death. Naturally, the soldier refused to accept his fate. He used all kinds of methods and strength in an attempt to break free. The veins on his face bulged, and his face turned red. He looked extremely ferocious, and his eyeballs even looked like they were about to pop out of their sockets. The heavy rods carried a huge force and smashed on his body. It was so painful that his internal organs were about to shift positions. However, his mouth was blocked. Even if he had a stomach full of resentment, he couldn't shout out. Very soon, a metallic smell gushed out of his mouth. That day, the wind was not noisy. The military training ground was silent. The soldiers of the entire battalion were ghastly pale. They were so frightened that they didn't even dare to take a deep breath. They watched helplessly as the soldier struggled violently until he was on the verge of death. Finally, he stopped breathing. The area from his back to his buttocks was already rotten, revealing his broken bones. The 4 female soldiers who were executing the execution still looked sullen. They weren't shocked by the scene in front of them at all. Seeing that the soldier had breathed his last, one of them released the hand that was restraining his shoulder. She raised her hand to check his breath and pulse. The female soldier said to Jiang Nongqin, who was watching the execution is over. The criminal is dead." Jiang Nongqin waved her hand. "Keep this person's corpse. It's the last mercy." She was punishing the chicken to warn the monkeys and to warn the impetuous soldiers. This was the consequence of violating the military order. Since then, the atmosphere in the military camp was solemn. They were always talking about the military rules, for fear that they would follow in the footsteps of others. Of course, there was another benefit besides that. When the soldiers of the male battalion saw the female soldiers of the female battalion, who dared to flirt with them, when they saw them on the road, their legs turned to jelly. They wished they could walk around them. The food that Jiang Pengji brought was very sufficient. Su Ku and a few others were busy sorting out the paperwork of the district headquarters of Chang'an District. Meng Hun and a few others led 2 battalions of soldiers to slightly repair the damaged city walls and gates. Jiang Nongqin led the remaining people to set up porridge stalls everywhere. After about 3 or 4 days, a few uninvited guests came to Malan District and Jiaoping District. General, our General Tsangtian died tragically. You have to avenge him. After experiencing a life and death escape for 3 or 4 days, how could the leaders of the Tsing army, who had lived like princes for more than half a year, bear it? Each of them was battered and exhausted. Their clothes were ragged. When they recalled the past few days, they felt that their mouths were full of bitterness. Chapter 515. Jiaoping District. Don't worry. Speak slowly. You're a man. Why are you crying? You're so girly. The leader of the Tsing army in Jiaoping District called himself General Pingtian. He was one of the leaders of the Tsing army. When he received a message from a soldier saying that there were companions from Chang'an District outside the district, and they kept repeating the news of General Tsangtian's death, he was horrified. He quickly asked his men to welcome the members of the Tsing army. At first glance, they were really General Tsangtian's subordinates. General Pingtian thought about it and hurriedly asked these people about the details of General Tsangtian's death. Who would have thought that as soon as he opened his mouth, these people were already crying their eyes out? Their faces were smeared with snot and tears. In addition, they hadn't washed themselves for many days, so their faces were stained with something. They looked very dirty and pathetic, and anyone who saw them would feel disgusted. General Tsangtian was killed by a group of people. They even snatched Chang'an District and swaggered in. They drove our brothers out. General Tsangtian died unjustly. The crying leader of the Tsing army was the subordinate who had previously flattered General Tsangtian. In order to escape, he could not bear to leave the good days of the Tsing army, so he could only seek refuge with his accomplice. Has Chang'an District been breached? Hearing the news, General Pingtian of Jiaoping District was frightened. He hurriedly asked for details. Brother, don't cry. Tell me first, which bastard killed Brother Tsangtian? How many people did he bring? Chang'an District was very close to Jiaoping District. It would only take a little more than a day to reach there on foot. Since the enemy had conquered Chang'an District, it was hard to guarantee that they would not target Jiaoping District. If they turned around and waved their troops, he had to at least know the details of the enemy and be mentally prepared. Hearing General Pingtian's concern, the leaders of the Tsing army, who had abandoned General Tsangtian's corpse and fled, cried even more sadly. They held the only emotional card firmly, hoping to get a good position here with the little favor left by General Tsangtian. They miserably described Jiang Pengji and her men as particularly abominable. They tried their best to beautify General Tsangtian's noble image and describe how the general sacrificed himself for others to delay the invading army, so that his brothers could have precious time to escape. Hearing these compliments, General Pingtian secretly curled his lips in disdain. According to his understanding of General Tsangtian, how could he not know his temperament? If he could abandon his subordinates in exchange for his own life, he would definitely do it by hook or by crook. How could he sacrifice himself for others? However, it was not appropriate for him to say this out loud. He also revealed a rather moved and sad expression, matching the other party's acting skills. After a long time, General Pingtian finally found out who had conquered Chang'an District. Xiangyang District. This is not easy. That's a tough nut to crack. No one has been able to crack it for half a year. The Tsing army only knows how to plunder. How would they know how to build? No matter how good the cards were, when they fell into their hands, they could only play out the worst situation. Chang'an District had been destroyed to such an extent that they were so poor that they couldn't even find a grain of rice. General Pingtian knew how to restrain himself. He did not drive the people of Jiaoping District to a dead end in one go. However, he still took advantage of them from time to time and plundered them again and again. The people were miserable, and there were often people who wanted to escape. General Pingtian did not know about other things, but he knew that there were no commoners in the district city. There was only the Tsing army left. In that case, how could he still be considered a general? Therefore, he cracked down on any attempt to escape and captured all the commoners who had escaped. However, life forced the commoners. Even if they risked being killed by the Tsingy army, there were still commoners who tried to escape. In the face of this phenomenon, General Ping Tian was, of course, so angry that he gritted his teeth. At the same time, he was even more envious of the nearby Xiangyang district. However, the district city was as tough as a tortoise's shell. It was not easy to go anywhere. Hearing that Xiangyang district had taken the initiative to attack Chang'an district, General Ping Tian was extremely flustered. Do you know how many people they brought to Chang'an district? General Ping Tian was secretly anxious. He was afraid that Jiang Pengji's next target would be him. He had not enjoyed the prestige of being general enough. About 6 or 7,000, maybe a lot more than that. The leader of the Tsing-Yi army answered cautiously. Of course, he did not know the exact number. He only guessed based on his feelings. How could there be a small number of people if they could conquer Chang'an district so easily? Little did he know that it was precisely his nonsense that made General Ping Tian develop greedy thoughts that he should not have. 6 or 7,000? General Ping Tian asked in surprise. Are you sure there are so many? There should be. There are too many thieves, so I can't distinguish them at the moment. The leader of the Tsing-Yi army secretly pinched the corner of his clothes. He was extremely nervous. 6 or 7,000. The total number of troops in Xiangyang district is less than 10,000. General Ping Tian's heart trembled. A bold idea shrouded his heart. He was so excited that he could not even hold his things steadily. If the people in Xiangyang district really sent 6 or 7,000 troops to attack Chang'an district, it meant that there were at most 3 or 4,000 troops guarding Xiangyang district. It would be a fool's dream if they wanted to defend the huge Xiangyang district with such a small number of troops. Perhaps he could take advantage of it? General Ping Tian was very clear about the situation in Chang'an district. It was a super big mess. It could definitely entangle Jiang Pengji and the others so that they would have no time to take care of the situation in Xiangyang district. In this way, the rear of Xiangyang district would be empty. However, thinking of the losses that the Tsing-Yi army suffered in Xiangyang district last year, General Ping Tian did not dare to let his guard down. If he wanted to conquer the city as soon as possible, he had to have sufficient troops. Taking advantage of the fact that the rear of Xiangyang district was empty and the main force was delayed by Chang'an district, he could take a gamble. Even if those people reacted, Xiangyang district would have already changed hands. When the main force rushed to the city, it would be of no help. Thinking of this, General Ping Tian's heart was burning. Originally, he only wanted to take 60% of the troops to raid Xiangyang district, but now he could not wait to take all the troops away and conquer Xiangyang district as soon as possible. He could not help but think of the shocked and resentful expression of Jiang Pengji's main force. Thinking of this, he comforted General Zhang Tian's old subordinates with a gentle voice. He was in a good mood. Although General Ping Tian looked down on General Zhang Tian's fat body and stupid brain, he also wanted to annex the old subordinates left behind by General Zhang Tian. No matter how small a mosquito was, it was still meat. If he could absorb the Tsing-Yi army that was under General Zhang Tian's control, his power could expand again. General Ping Tian asked, "Apart from you, are there any other brothers who survived?" The leader of the Tsing-Yi army answered miserably. Only a few hundred brothers were lucky enough to escape. The rest were all killed. Some of them fled to Jiaoping district, while the rest fled to Maolin district. General Ping Tian was shocked. He was afraid that the Tsing-Yi army in Maolin district would also think that Xiangyang district was empty and run to take advantage of the situation. A sense of crisis arose. He patted the shoulder of General Zhang Tian's old subordinate and said indignantly, "General Zhang Tian and I were comrades. He was killed by the traitors. How can I not avenge him as a brother? Don't worry. I'll summon the troops and destroy the traitor's lair." Chapter 516. Not long after, the scouts who were paying close attention to the activities of the two counties sent news that the two counties were in the midst of organizing their troops. Hearing that, Jiang Pengji smiled slyly and proudly. If she did not make the Tsing-Yi army lose everything, she would write her name backwards. Assemble the troops and count the soldiers, she said. Summon the gentlemen and the lieutenants. Just as Wei Ci thought, Jiang Pengji planned to split her troops into two groups. One group would launch a sneak attack on Jiaoping district, while the other group would launch a sneak attack on Maolin district. After conquering the two districts, they would assemble their troops and rush back to Xianyang district. They would coordinate from the inside and the outside to outflank the Tsing-Yi army's rear. They dared to lay their hands on her property. If she did not teach the Tsing-Yi army a lesson, they would really think that she was a pushover. Jiang Pengji already had a draft in her mind on how to divide the troops. Jiang Pengji planned to leave 1,500 to guard Chang'an district. She would lead 1,500 elites to launch a surprise attack on Jiaoping district, and the remaining troops would launch a sneak attack on Maolin district. What they were fighting for now was the time difference. The sooner the better, the higher the chance of victory. Zixiao, you're not feeling well. It's not suitable for you to rush over in a short period of time. You and Officer Meng will lead these 1,500 soldiers to guard Chang'an district. The damaged city gate had already been partially repaired, and together with the city defense equipment, it should be able to resist for a period of time. Wenzheng and I will attack Jiaoping district. Han Mei, Nongqin, and Xiaoyu will lead the remaining soldiers to attack Maolin district. We must conquer it as soon as possible. Wei Ci secretly cried and laughed. She had indeed chosen Qiguan Rang. Qiguan Rang would not stop her from having fun at all, but he had no choice but to accept the order along with the others. Jiang Pengji said decisively, "We'll set off after nightfall." It was hard to guarantee that no enemy scouts would discover their intentions during the 100-day march, but it was much safer at night. At the same time, far away in Xianyang district, Feng Jin was still wandering in the sea of documents. Feng Jin's recent daily life could be summed up in 11 words. Very busy, extremely busy, super busy. Everyone's work pressure was piled on him, and he said that he should spend more time with his wife. It was all a lie. How busy were they exactly? Ever since the army set off for war, he had not stepped foot into his house. Currently, there were only 4,000 soldiers left in Xianyang district. Although it was not considered a shortage, if there was a heavy pressure on the border, these 4,000 people would not be enough. Fortunately, his lord still had some conscience. What conscience? She did not drag Zhang Ping, the treasurer of Xianyang district, along with her. The carpentry workshop that Zhang Ping was in charge of could produce all kinds of siege and defense weapons. These things could give Xianyang district more confidence. Under Feng Jin's instructions, Zhang Ping got the woodworking workshop to manufacture all kinds of defensive equipment urgently. He wished he could arm the entire Xianyang district to the teeth. Of course, from Zhang Ping's point of view, with their current level of equipment, even their teeth were made of cast iron. Feng Jin was so busy that he could not see his wife, but his wife could come and see him. She was even carrying Chang Sheng, who could speak clearly, in her arms. "Daddy, Daddy, hug." When Chang Sheng saw her father, whom she had not seen for a few days, she excitedly asked for a hug. Feng Jin rubbed his sore eyes to make sure that his ears and eyes were not hallucinating. He really heard his daughter's call and also saw his wife and daughter standing at the entrance of the government office, hesitating and not daring to approach. Seeing that way, Jing Xian was worried. Feng Jin said to her, "Come in, there are no important documents here." He raised his hand to catch his daughter, who had become a ton heavier. Before he could sigh, Changsheng stepped on his thigh and kissed him. "Don't kiss me, don't kiss me. Doesn't this girl find it dirty?" Feng Jin had been staying up late for several days. He slept less than 2 hours every day and was so busy that he did not have the time to wash up. He looked a little embarrassed. His daughter kissed him immediately, afraid that she would get dirty. "Daddy?" Changsheng was despised. She tilted her head in confusion. His daughter was still young. Feng Jin did not know how to explain. He could only look at Wei Jingxian for help. His wife was still the best. She understood his predicament and reached out to carry his daughter back. She said gently, "Daddy is tired. Don't disturb him." Changsheng lay in Wei Jingxian's arms. Her big watery eyes were like those of a fawn, which melted people's hearts. "Cool." Changsheng hugged her mother with both arms. Wei Jingxian glanced at the table and was shocked by the pile of documents on it. Why are there so many? Xianyang District was only a district. Why were there so many documents that needed to be handled? In her impression, the district magistrates were very idle. They were either walking their birds and dogs every day or spending their time in the mountains and rivers. They were so free and unfettered. Her husband only assisted Lanting. When Lanting went to war, her husband temporarily took over the official duties. Why was he so busy? Feng Jin rubbed his eyebrows and said, "After the spring plowing, we still have to collect farm tools and cattle. These things have to be accounted for. Xianyang District is considered a rare, peaceful refuge in the north. Every day, refugees from all over want to enter the city. These people have to be settled. Many wealthy families have migrated here to seek refuge. They want to buy the good houses under the Lord's name. They have to deal with these. Currently, Xianyang District was still under construction. It was becoming more and more prosperous. Seeing how clean and beautiful the newly built rental houses in the district headquarters were, many locals of Xianyang District felt uncomfortable. They also wanted to rebuild their houses. However, if they wanted to rebuild, they had to pay for all the materials and labor costs themselves. It was not cheap. That kind of house could not be built with money. They still had to go through the procedures of the district headquarters. They had to approve the kiln to fire this batch of green bricks. They had to confirm the quantity of green bricks before they could start building the houses. In the end, they needed Feng Jin's signature and approval. Otherwise, they couldn't build the houses. Usually, a few people would share the workload. Now that he was the only one left to look after the house, it was naturally very tiring. Apart from these messy matters, there were also the local government affairs of Xianyang District and various conflicts. They were trivial and troublesome. It was either conflicts about family affairs or disputes about the uneven distribution of land. Feng Jin really wanted to throw these matters to the women's department in the government office. However, the women's department was already crazy busy. As a man, he really couldn't bring himself to make things difficult for a group of young ladies. Wei Jingxian saw that her husband's eyes were bloodshot and his eye bags were dark. Her heart ached a little. She asked, "Are these documents very important?" Feng Jin was startled. His brain, which hadn't slept for a long time, reacted slowly. After a while, he understood the meaning of her words. "It's not important. It's just very trivial," Feng Jin said. Wei Jingxian thought about it. She reached out and took a portion of it. Then, she sorted the various documents according to their importance. Changsheng stayed in her arms and squirmed restlessly. She raised her claws and grabbed her sleeve. She minded her own business and played with it. After eating the milk paste in the afternoon, Changsheng lay on Wei Jingxian's thighs and slept with her limbs spread out. Her fat calves could hook onto the table. She was busy from noon to dusk. Only then did the mountain of bamboo slips slowly decrease. "Thank you, madam." Feng Jin rubbed the space between his eyebrows and smiled at Wei Jingxian. "Let's go home," Wei Jingxian said with a smile. Chapter 517. Mr. Feng, something bad has happened. Luo Yu said. Feng Jin's heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to carry the sleeping Changsheng, Luo Yu's voice made him stop. What happened? The Tsing-Yi army in Maolin District and Jiaoping District are going to attack us. It's less than half a day's journey. What? Feng Jin widened his eyes in shock. Why did the Tsing-Yi army suddenly attack Xianyang District? The Tsing-Yi army in the two districts are still well-behaved. Why did they suddenly attack Xianyang District? Xianyang District had sufficient troops and horses. The Tsing-Yi army had tried a few times but failed. Why would they take the initiative to find trouble now? Could it be? Feng Jin's brain started to work again. He quickly figured out the crux of the matter. It was most likely that Chang'an District had been conquered. The other two districts thought that Xianyang district was weak and wanted to take advantage of it. He secretly gritted his teeth. He couldn't continue following a lord who specialized in tricking her subordinates. Wei Jingxian's face paled. Husband? Were they preparing for another war? It's okay. Take Chongqing home first. I can't go back for a few days. When Lanting comes back, I'll make her pay. You can't cheat me like this. He had said that he would stay behind to accompany his wife and child, but in the blink of an eye, he had caused such a huge mess. Feng Jin got up and strode out of the government office. Wei Jingxian let out a long sigh. She lowered her head to look at her daughter, who had just woken up with a start. She felt terrible, but there was nothing she could do. In this chaotic world, it was impossible not to be disturbed by wars. He lowered his head and kissed his daughter's brow. He whispered, Chongsheng, let's go home and wait for your father to return. There was still half a day's journey before the arrival of the Tsing-Yi army. Xianyang district still had plenty of time to prepare. Feng Jin inquired about the number of guards and defensive equipment at each city gate, and his heart calmed down a little. Fortunately, the city defense equipment was ready. If it was a night battle and a sneak attack, the Tsing-Yi army would not be able to return. Feng Jin usually gave people the impression that he was a dignified gentleman. It was rare to see him angry. If people thought that he was a kind person because of this, they would be making a big mistake. Anyone who dared to lay their hands on Xianyang district, he would make them pay a painful price. He and Luo Yu inspected the city walls, and only after ensuring that there were no problems did they feel relieved to leave the city walls. Feng Jin said in a low voice, the two troops of the Tsing-Yi army are attacking in different directions. According to the scouts' reports, there's a certain difference in the time of arrival. Tell the soldiers on both sides of the city gates to keep a close watch and not let their guard down. We have to hold on for at least 5 days. This is going to be a tough battle. Luo Yu nodded as he listened. He had no objections to Feng Jin's arrangement. After a while, Feng Jin suddenly said, Oh, right, after nightfall, no matter who it is, the city gate must not be opened. Luo Yu's heart tightened. These words had a profound meaning. Could it be, what you mean is that there are spies from the Tsing-Yi army in the city? Luo Yu asked. Feng Jin frowned and said, That's hard to say. After all, when we first entered Xianyang, we captured many members of the Tsing-Yi army. It's hard to guarantee that the former members of the Tsing-Yi army are not related to those enemies. It's always better to be cautious. Luo Yu looked indifferent on the surface, but he remembered these words in his heart. The current Xianyang district was a paradise in troubled times that they had poured their blood, sweat, and tears into for half a year. No one was allowed to covet it. Even if he felt that the members of the Tsing-Yi army who had surrendered were completely loyal and would not rebel, nothing was absolute. It was better to be cautious. Understand. I'll definitely pass this message to the guards at each city gate. In order to ensure that the soldiers had sufficient energy, they changed shifts every 2 hours after nightfall to ensure that everyone was full of energy. In the dark night, torches were lit on the city walls of Xianyang district, like the only light in the world. Jiaoping district was the closest to Xianyang district. It would only take them a day and a half if they traveled at full speed. It was already late at night when they arrived. One of the minions said, General, it seems that the security in Xianyang district is quite strict. General Pingtian rode a tall and strong horse. This time, he brought more than 5,000 members of the Tsing-Yi army with him. Each of them was an elite. Those who stayed in Jiaoping district were old and weak. They were not suitable for long-distance raids. If he brought them along, they would definitely slow down the pace of the army. If it's not strict, why do you think this fat piece of meat hasn't been taken away? General Pingtian's heart skipped a beat. He said coldly, I've sent people to investigate the situation in Xianyang district in the past. The guards are 2 to 3 times weaker than they are now. Now that they're so solemn, it's obvious that they're not confident. The more weak they were, the more they had to pretend to be powerful. General Pingtian was even more confident. The minions flattered him. General is unparalleled in wisdom. No matter how hard Xianyang district tries to hide, It can't hide from your sharp eyes. General Ping Tian snorted. However, the minions had a sweet tongue, so he flattered him very much. Let's wait a little longer. We'll launch a surprise attack with a rocket at midnight. General Ping Tian was different from the other leaders of the Tsing army. Not only did he like to plunder money and beauties, but he also liked to organize various weapons. For example, a rocket was an arrow that was pierced with a coarse cloth dyed with oil and then shot out with a bow. Once it pierced into the flesh, the wound would easily fester and become infected. He wanted to launch a surprise attack and catch the other party off guard, but he did not know that Xiangyang district was already prepared. Was it a big deal to have a rocket? The night was dark. Feng Jin seized the opportunity to sleep for a few hours. At midnight, the minions woke him up as ordered. How's the situation at the north and west gates? Are there any signs of the enemy? Feng Jin took the wet cloth from the minions and wiped his face casually. The cold water stains and the night breeze dispelled his remaining sleepiness. He could not help but shiver, and his mind was completely awake. The minions replied, "Sir, there are no signs of the enemy at the north and west gates." Feng Jin took a deep breath and said, "Don't let your guard down." Everyone in the Tsing army had different degrees of night blindness. It was difficult for them to see things at night, but it did not mean that they could not launch a night attack. The torches at the city gates were burning fiercely. They could be seen from afar. It was the best guiding light for the Tsing army. Many soldiers were also informed that there might be a surprise attack by the enemy tonight. All of them were on high alert. It was late at night. This was the time when the people slept the most. Even the Tsing army, who was lying in ambush, could not help but rub their eyes. At this moment, a member of the Tsing army with excellent eyesight saw that the soldiers on the city walls were already yawning sleepily. It seemed that they could not open their eyes. He immediately said to General Ping Tian in surprise, "General, it's almost time." The grass outside the city was lush. It was an excellent cover for the Tsing army. They slowly approached the city walls. They were less than 300 meters away, but the soldiers on the city walls still did not find any traces of them. General Ping Tian was overjoyed. He ordered, "Launch the rocket." Because the shooting range was not enough, the archers needed to move forward further. Chapter 518. The archers of the Tsing army crouched down and passed through the dense grass. They were getting closer and closer. General Ping Tian's heart was in his throat. The distance between them was gradually shortened from more than 300 meters. 250 meters. 200 meters. 150 meters. After all, ordinary bows and arrows were not improved crossbows. Not everyone could draw a heavy bow with a longer shooting range. It could be said that this archer troop of more than 100 people was General Ping Tian's flesh and blood. He would be heartbroken if even one of them was gone. As they got closer and closer, General Ping Tian felt that the atmosphere was getting more and more solemn. He commanded the Tsing army to move forward slowly. The night became their best camouflage. The Xiangyang district seemed to be within their reach. Finally, the archers entered the shooting range. One by one, they took out their bows and arrows from the quiver at their waists. The arrowheads had been wrapped in a layer of coarse cloth that was stained with oil. They only needed to use a flint or a match to ignite it, and it would be instantly ignited. It would pierce into one's flesh and cause great damage. The sound of flint rubbing against each other was heard. Some sparks splashed on it, and a cluster of flames appeared. General Ping Tian stared fixedly at the soldiers on the city wall. He was still yawning sleepily. At that moment, the archers had already drawn their bows and aimed at them. He shouted in a low voice, "Shoot!" However, a second before the archers released their bowstrings, the soldiers who were yawning lazily suddenly squatted down and hid under the battlements. Black shields rose from under the battlements, and the arrows pierced directly into the shields. General Ping Tian widened his eyes in astonishment. "What's going on? What's going on? They've already discovered it. They're just cooperating with you." The shields blocked the first wave of arrows. The soldiers hiding under the battlements hurriedly pushed the ballistae to the edge of the city wall. The arrows were already loaded. The ballistae could be used for both sieging and defending a city. According to Jiang Pingji and Zhang Ping's research, they further improved the known ballistae so that 6 heavy bows could be placed on them. They twisted the reel at the back, loaded the arrows, and used the combined force of the heavy bows to shoot special long arrows. The shooting range was 600 steps, and it was extremely lethal. The shaft of the crossbow was made of wood, the head of the spear was made of iron, and the tail of the arrow was made of iron. According to Jiang Pengji's previous experiments, ordinary ladders, giant shields, and wooden curtains could be easily penetrated. It could be said to be as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. The members of the Tsing-Yi army were also within shooting range. Wasn't that courting death? The arrows left the bowstring and buzzed incessantly, as if carrying the roar of the crowd. The arrows rained down on the Tsing-Yi army like the tide. When the shield on the city wall was raised to block the fire arrow, General Ping Tian was stunned. The vanguard troops of the Tsing-Yi army had already carried ladders to the city walls, but they were greeted by tyrannical arrows. The arrows easily penetrated 2 or 3 people's bodies, and blood splattered everywhere. Their bodies tumbled due to the inertia of charging forward, and then they stopped breathing. The enemy was prepared. When General Ping Tian realized this, he was extremely shocked. He did not know where the news had leaked out. The soldiers on the city walls were obviously very sleepy. It did not seem fake at all, but reality slapped him hard in the face. After the first wave of arrows rained down, the members of the Tsing-Yi army who were shot were either dead or no longer had the strength to fight. A strong smell of blood permeated the air. General Ping Tian gritted his teeth. He bet that Xiangyang district's defense was weak. As long as they climbed up the city walls, they would definitely win. They must not be scared off. Thinking of this, he roared, "Attack the city!" The ladders were placed on the city walls, so the crossbows could not reach them. The members of the Tsing-Yi army would die faster if they escaped. No matter how fast they escaped, could they run 600 steps in an instant? In contrast, the city walls were closer to them. All of this was within Feng Jin's expectations. He raised his hand and covered his curled lips with his long sleeve. He also covered the bloodthirsty and fierce glint in his eyes. Prepare the rolling logs and stones. The city walls of Xiangyang district were not too high. The remaining members of the Tsing-Yi army had already approached the city walls after leaving 700 to 800 corpses behind. The archers stood in the blind spot of the crossbows and shot. On the other side, members of the Tsing-Yi army had already climbed up the ladders. The people who climbed up first were hit by the rolling logs and huge stones. They screamed and fell to the ground with a dull thud. Although the members of the Tsing-Yi army fell miserably like dumplings, there were still people who approached the height of the city walls. Below them, they carried the heavy logs and hit the city gates. Each sound seemed to hit the hearts of everyone. Feng Jin continued to command calmly. Among the troops, there were experienced veterans. Naturally, there were also new recruits who had yet to see blood. They were so nervous that their hands were trembling. However, under Feng Jin's loud and calm command, their trembling hands and rapidly beating hearts gradually calmed down. Their brains could not think of anything else at all. Their bodies followed Feng Jin's command to move the equipment or load the bows and arrows. The wooden shield was very heavy. It required 3 people to hold it together to be able to stand steadily. It blocked the many rocket attacks of the members of the Tsing-Yi army. Load the rocket, Feng Jin continued to command. The troops picked up the improved crossbows and lit the arrows. It was indeed difficult to move the crossbows, but it did not mean that they could not fight back. They would give them a taste of their own medicine. The rocket carried flames and pierced through the dark night sky. It pierced the members of the Tsing-Yi army who were climbing the ladder and successfully pushed a group of people down. "Sir, the pressure at the city gates is getting stronger and stronger." Luiyue, who was dressed in armor, ran up from below the city with a ghastly pale face. Feng Jin said, "It's okay. Continue." There was more than one group of members of the Tsing-E army attacking Xianyang district. There was another group. As long as the city defense weapons were not exhausted, it was impossible for these people to climb the city walls. There was no doubt about the penetrating power of the improved crossbows. Coupled with the lethality of the rocket, almost every member of the Tsing-E army who fell from the ladder did not have a chance to wake up. It was not only because the rocket penetrated their bodies. There was another important reason. Their companions stepped on their bodies to climb up the ladder. Even if their corpses were not completely dead, they were trampled into meat paste by these feet. Feng Jin continued to command the troops guarding the city. Everything was in order. Compared to the casualties at the bottom, the troops guarding the city were at most slightly injured. The logs below were still trying hard to hit the city gates. General Pingtian's face was already ghastly pale and black. The city gates could not be climbed up and the city walls could not be broken. Could it be that the military strength of Xianyang district was not as few as he thought? His firm heart had begun to waver. However, he had no way out now. If he retreated at that moment, he would definitely be annexed by the nearby Tsing-E army. In serious cases, he might even lose his life. There was no possibility of him turning back now. He could only bite the bullet and go forward. At that moment, he hoped that the Tsing-E army in Maolin district would attack Xianyang district. In that case, the chances of winning would be greatly increased. The sound of hitting the city gates continued. Not only were there soldiers resisting inside the city gates, but there were also thick and heavy green bricks. Yes, Feng Jin had moved tens of thousands of green bricks produced from the brick kiln to the city gates to block them. Even if the Tsing-E army used all their strength, would they be able to break it open in a short time? Chapter 519. Shangguan Wan had been living in the district headquarters for a while. Jiang Pingji originally wanted to arrange a two-level house for her, but she felt that she should not receive a reward without doing anything. She would only receive a reward after she had accumulated a certain amount of experience in the district headquarters. Otherwise, she would be dissatisfied and be criticized by others. Jiang Pingji knew Shangguan Wan's stubbornness, so she did not insist. It was good for her to live in the district headquarters. At least no one dared to ignore Shangguan Wan. The girls in the government office dared not belittle or neglect her. With her background, she got the hang of the work in the government office quickly. The girls gradually admired her and acknowledged her as their superior. Because the army took many talents with them, the pressure in the government office suddenly increased. Shangguan Wan was busy until the fourth watch before she finished her work. She washed her face with the cold well water to wash away her sleepiness. She was barely awake. The Tsing-E army attacked wantonly. The soldiers were defending outside the city. Shangguan Wan was very worried, but she could not help much. She could only do the work at hand and try her best to reduce the administrative work. She planned to go back to her room to rest for a while. As she walked, she gently beat the sore spot on her neck with her fist. Halfway there, her sharp eyes saw a black shadow quickly drifting across the corridor, and her heart suddenly leaped into her throat. "Who's there?" Shangguan Wan secretly pulled out the short knife from her waist and looked in that direction vigilantly. After a while, the black shadow stopped and said to her, "Oh, it's Lady Shangguan." This voice, isn't it Sister Lanting's maid, Takshu? Her tense nerves relaxed. Shangguan Wan sighed and said, "Oh, it's Sister Takshu. You scared me." She went forward and said, "Sister, are you getting up at night? Why didn't you light the lamp? It would be bad if you tripped because you couldn't see clearly." Shangguan Wan opened the paper and found that Takshu was still carrying a lamp. She helped Takshu light the lamp. She knew it. How could she not light the lamp when she woke up in the middle of the night? It was probably blown out by the strong night wind. "Thank you, Lady Shangguan," Takshu said gently. "Did you just come back from the government office?" "Yes, there are too many trivial things in the government office. But thinking of the chaos outside, these things have become sweet burdens." Shangguan Wan felt that she had found a new self. Whether it was her job in the government office or practicing martial arts to strengthen her body, she was full of motivation and vitality. Takshu was still gentle. She held the lantern and said, It's dark outside. Lady Shangwan, go back to your room and rest. You still have work to do tomorrow. Shangwan Wan's room was very close. She declined Takshu's attempt to give her the lantern, waved her hand, and returned to her room while yawning. Takshu stood rooted to the ground for a long time. It was not until Shangwan Wan opened the door and lit the candle in the room that she revealed a strange smile. She turned her back to Shangwan Wan's room, raised her hand to the side of the lantern, and gently blew on the candle inside, extinguishing the flame inside. If Shangwan Wan had looked more carefully and focused, she would probably have noticed Takshu's abnormality. The clothes she wore on the outside were obviously much larger and did not seem to fit her body properly. The lapels of her clothes were grayish-brown in color. Takshu quietly left the district headquarters and took off her clothes, revealing her grayish-brown clothes. This was the uniform of the female battalion. She folded up her outer clothes and placed them in a corner of the alley. She stood rooted to the ground for a while. She looked at the west and north gates in the distance, and a hint of ruthlessness flashed in her eyes. After a long time, her figure disappeared into the darkness and shadows. She did not go to the west and north gates, but to the south gate. At the moment, the battle on Feng Jin's side had already entered a state of bloodthirst. Occasionally, one or two members of the Tsing army would climb up the city walls. The soldiers would also work together to smack them down with their heavy shields. There were already several piles of corpses at the foot of the city walls. The Tsing army stepped on their corpses and climbed up, getting closer and closer to the city walls. Below them, the frequency of hitting the city gates became faster and faster. Every time they hit, a layer of wall dust would fall. Dozens of cracks had already appeared on the sturdy city gates. It looked like it was about to be smashed. General Ping Tian secretly gritted his teeth. Is this gate made of copper and iron? It's already so rotten, but it still hasn't been knocked open? Finally, when the Tsing army was about to exhaust their strength, the city gates that could not bear the burden were finally scrapped. However, what blocked their way was a thick brick wall made of solid green bricks. There was no one behind the city gates to stop them. A group of soldiers were using green bricks to block the entrance. F***CKU. General Ping Tian could not help but curse when he saw the situation. On the city walls, Feng Jin ordered someone to bring the wolf's Fong slap over. He planned to teach the Tsing army a lesson. Luo Yue had already rushed to the south gate to guard. It was estimated that another group of Tsing army would arrive soon. Bring the wolf's Fong slap. Feng Jin's voice was already hoarse. Even though he tried his best to shout loudly, he seemed especially weak in the midst of the battle cries. What was the wolf's Fong slap? It was a rectangular object that was slightly flat. The surface was covered with sharp, thick, and long iron nails that were like wolf's teeth. There were buckles at the four corners, and they were hooked to the city walls with sliding ropes and pulleys. If the enemy intended to climb the city walls to attack, they could use the wolf's Fong slap to hit them. With one slap, there would be dozens of bloody holes on the body. There were still plenty of weapons to defend the city, but the Tsing army was already showing signs of defeat. In particular, the Tsing army was filled with joy. They spent a lot of effort to break through the city gates, only to discover that the entrance had been blocked by countless neatly arranged green bricks. Breaking through them was no different than breaking through a city wall. That kind of feeling was simply terrible. Initially, they thought that they would be able to attack and take them down very quickly. They never expected the other party to be so well prepared and use all kinds of methods. General Ping Tian was stunned. He never knew that defending a city could come up with so many tricks. Now he was in a dilemma. After fighting for nearly 4 hours, the Tsing army had lost many men. Occasionally, some soldiers on the city walls were injured due to carelessness. They only had ladders and bows and arrows to attack the city, but the other party had ballistae, improved ballistae, wooden shields, and fire arrows. If they were so capable, why were they holed up in the small Shenyang district? Why couldn't they just go straight to heaven? General Ping Tian was so angry that he almost vomited blood. He felt as if he had F***ed countless sows. He originally thought that he was there to F***CK the world, but he didn't expect that he would end up being the one to F***CK the world instead. After a while, the soldiers told Feng Jin that they had used up all the rocks and rolling logs, and there were not enough arrows in the quiver. Feng Jin gritted his teeth as he watched the Tsing-E army gradually climb the city wall. Although they were killed, their numbers had obviously increased. Move the green bricks up. If there were not enough rocks, he would make up for the green bricks. He did not believe that he could not defeat the Tsing-E army. Yes. Elsewhere at the south gate, Luoyue hurried to the south gate and found that there was no special situation there. It was also the soldiers' turn to change shifts. He asked the guards carefully, but he could not calm down. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.